All right, can you hear me back there? Good evening, everybody. It's 5:15 p.m., Thursday, December 12th, 2019, time for the regular meeting of the Wenatchee City Council. I've called the meeting to order. We always start with the pledge to our flag, and so Councilmember Poyer, this being your last meeting, would you lead us in the pledge?
Love to. Please stand and face the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Poyer. And for the record tonight, we have all 7 city council members with us this evening. Our first item on our agenda tonight are the consent items, which includes the agenda, vouchers, and minutes from the previous meetings, and a number of motions regarding the completions of contracts. So I would entertain a motion if we had one.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda, the vouchers, and minutes from previous meetings, and also make a motion for the City Council to accept the work performed by contractor DJB Construction on the Poplar Avenue Sanitary Sewer Extension, project number 1902, and further authorize the mayor to sign the final contract voucher certificate on behalf of the City of Wenatchee. And a motion for the City Council to accept the work performed by the contractor Hearst Construction LLC on City Project number 1715, Middle School Crossing Improvements Project, and further authorize the mayor to sign the final contract voucher. And a motion for the City Council to accept the work performed by the contractor Hearst Construction LLC on City Project number 1616, Western and Springwater Intersection Control, and further authorize the mayor to sign the final contract voucher. And lastly, a motion for the City Council to authorize the mayor to accept the work performed by the contractor Grindline Skate Parks on the Hale Skate Park project number 16-1666, and further authorize the mayor to sign the final contract voucher on behalf of the City of Wenatchee.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilmember Huffaker, second by Councilmember Bailey, to adopt this evening's agenda, vouchers, and minutes from the previous meetings. The motion for the council to accept the work performed by contractor DJB Construction on the Poplar Avenue Sanitary Sewer Extension Project number 1902, and authorize the mayor's signature on the final voucher on behalf of the city to accept the work performed by contractor Hearst Construction LLC on project number 1715, Middle School Crossing Improvement Project. Authorize the mayor's signature on that voucher. Also to accept the work performed by Hearst Construction LLC on project number 1616, Western and Springwater Intersection Control, and authorize the mayor's signature on that contract voucher. And also to approve the work performed by the contractor Grindline Skate Parks on the Hale Skate Park project number 16-1666, and further authorize the mayor's signature on the final contract voucher as well, all on behalf of the City of Wenatchee. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Your Honor, before we go on,
Yeah.
it came to our attention last night that people listening on the radio and watching videos are having a hard time hearing us. So we need to do a better job of getting our microphones up closer to us so that our voices are being picked up and recorded.
All right. Next on our agenda is citizen comment. So we obviously have 2 public hearing items this evening, one regarding business and occupation tax, the second regarding billboards. So we'll be taking full public testimony during that time period. If anybody has anything else they'd like to address the council on that isn't any of those 2 items, this would be a time if you came up and give us your name and address for the record. We'd give you about 3 minutes. Need a wave, smoke signal, something, let us know you're interested. Don't see any takers. So we will start this evening with our service awards. So HR Director Carrie Page, come on up, and I know we've got a few employees that have some service awards tonight.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I have the honor of recognizing employees that have reached milestones, and I want to express our sincere gratitude and appreciation for the work that they've done for us and for their many contributions to our success, and we appreciate their dedication. I'm to start with our 5-year employees, and as I name them, those that are here, if you could please step forward. Corey Bernash is actually on SWAT patrol tonight, so he's not able to be here, but he's an officer first class with the police department. He's been with us for 5 years. Jared Gardner is here tonight. He is a maintenance worker 2 in the Parks Department, the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services. Brooklyn Holton, Housing and Community Planner for Community Development. And Liz Rivera, Utility Billing Specialist for Finance. So I think we've got 2 of the 3.
Nope, we got 3.
And if you could do, this is Brooklyn, this is, oh yay! This is Jared, and this is Liz. And then if the 3 of you could center in the middle, I'm doing something new this time. I'm going to try to get the city of Wenatchee in the background. Yeah. Group photo. Oh, that's perfect. Okay. When I had a special request for waist up. Awesome.
Okay, now me, please. One more.
Congratulations. Next, I'd like to bring Tammy Stanger up here, our city clerk, who has reached 10 years of service.
Like it was yesterday.
So, yeah, there you go. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Congratulations. And we have a 30-year milestone tonight. That is Tom Lewis, maintenance worker 2 in the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services. He is at the cemetery.
There he is.
All of them.
30 years.
That's incredible. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. Okay.
Thank you. It's awesome. 30 years is great. I appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Is that the end of your presentations?
Yes.
All right.
Well, I have 2 more. I think I'm next on the agenda.
Yes, you are. All right, so that concludes our presentation. So we have a number of action items before we get to our public hearing items. So the first are regarding wages and then pay ranges. So Carrie, we'll turn it over to you.
Yes, so I have before you a request for a motion to approve ordinance number 2019-45, which establishes positions for regular status employment within the City of Wenatchee Management and Administrative Group, fixing the compensation to be paid for calendar year 2020, and repeals ordinance number 2019-07.
So you guys have the list in your packet today with all of the wages. Most of those just have the standard AFSCME wage increase built into them. As I told the Finance Committee and those of you at the budget, during the budget, we did make a few small adjustments to some of the upper management team, but this is all sort of built into the budget the way we've adopted it. So for most of your management team, including all the directors, there's not one of them that's, when you look at comparable cities, is anything above 92 or 93%. We try to get them up to our comparable cities. We generally don't, and they're generally short of that, but we sometimes have to make wage adjustments to even keep them in that sort of area. So, and all the rest are listed in your packet tonight.
Your Honor, I make a motion for the City Council to adopt ordinance number 2019-45, establishing positions for regular status employment within the City of Wenatchee Management Administrative Group, fixing the compensation to be paid for the calendar year 2020, and repealing ordinance number 2019-07.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Kulas, second by Councilmember Harold. to adopt ordinance 2019-45, establishing positions for regular status employment within the City of Wenatchee Management Administrative Group, fixing the compensation to be paid for the calendar year 2020, and repealing ordinance 2019-07. Discussion?
Carrie, what was the, Mayor referred to the ACME rate. What was the percentage of increase, average kind of across the,
For the management group.
right?
So there was just the 2.85 COLA for primarily the full group, with the exception of most of the directors received approximately, I just ran this today, I would say, shoot, I'm so sorry, I can't think off the top of my head.
But the AFSCME one was 2.8.
2.8.
2.8, and I just know I did calculate that we were 50% of what the comparable cities were. The average increase for the group was half of what the market was providing, and so I would say approximately 6% average.
That was for the directors?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any questions for Carrie? You need to speak in the microphone too so people can hear you.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Any other comment? Questions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And next, regarding temporary employees.
The next ordinance in front of you is ordinance number 2019-46. As you know, the Washington State minimum wage increased, the largest it has in many, many years, $1.50 to $13.50 per hour effective January 1st. I would like to request a motion to approve ordinance number 2019-46, which establishes the pay ranges for our temporary employees hired during the calendar year 2020, and it would repeal ordinance 2019-06.
Mayor, I'm going to make a motion for the city council to adopt ordinance number 2019-46, establishing pay ranges for temporary employees for the calendar year 2020 and repealing ordinance number 2019-06.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Poyer, second by Councilmember Markart to adopt ordinance number 2019-46, establishing pay ranges for temporary employees for the calendar year 2020 and repealing ordinance 2019-06. Any discussion?
Our minimum last year was $15. Is that correct?
No,
It
12.
was 12?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
so we paid people 12?
yes.
Okay.
And number of temporary employees we have during the course of the year, is it 100?
It's an upwards of 80 to 90.
Between the pool and parks and
Correct. Yeah. Like
maintenance folks, lifeguards?
Lifeguards, maintenance, seasonal maintenance workers, and interns.
Okay, thank you.
Recreation leaders.
All right, any other questions for Carrie? So we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. We're going to appoint some folks to the Parks and Rec Commission.
I'll recuse myself on this one.
Is there a reason why?
Thank
Hi,
you,
David.
Your Honor. Dave Erickson, Parks and Recreation Director for the city. Tonight, I'm requesting 2 appointments to the Arts Rec and Park Commission. We have 2 vacancies coming up at the end of the year. You might be familiar with the first applicant. His name's Lyle Markart. So we're requesting approval of Resolution 2019-56, which would appoint Lyle to the commission with a term ending December 31st of 2022. And then the second appointment would reappoint Lisa Aden to her second term on the commission, and that would be through approval of Resolution 2019-57. Both candidates came to the last Arts Rec and Park Commission meeting and were interviewed by the commission, and the commission unanimously recommended their appointments.
Your Honor, I make a motion for the City Council to approve Resolution Number 2019-56, appointing a member to the Arts, Recreation, and Parks Commission, and that being Lyle Markart.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Huffaker, second by Councilmember Poyer to adopt Resolution 2019-56, appointing Lyle Markart to the Arts, Recreation, and Parks Commission. This would be the time to discuss the merits of Lyle.
Knew that was going to happen.
What do you guys think? I don't know.
I feel a little obligated.
I think you'll be a great fit.
Oh, he will. I'm joking with him.
I know.
All right.
I appreciate Lyle joining a lot of things after this. It's good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lyle.
Stay involved.
involved, yeah.
Yep.
Means a lot.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. We've discussed them. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries with one abstention. And then we have another motion right below it.
Your Honor, I move for City Council to approve Resolution Number 2019-57, reappointing a member to the Arts, Recreation, and Parks Commission, and that being Lisa Adden.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Harold, second by Councilmember Bailey to adopt Resolution 2019-57, reappointing a member to the Arts, Recreation, and Parks Commission, that being Lisa Adon. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, David. Charter Communication Franchise, Allison?
Good evening. Excuse me.
You're going to have to be close to the mic there, sick one.
Okay. Allison Williams, Executive Services Director. I have for you Ordinance 2019-48, which would renew a franchise with Charter Communications. They have requested, actually, we sent them, after our public hearing last week, we sent them the one last change that we had, and they have requested time to consider that, and we actually do need to consider this in a public hearing, and so we would request the continuation of this item to January 9th. We'll advertise for a public hearing, and we'll have concurrence from them at that time.
So you're looking for a motion just to extend this until January 9th?
We will just pull this
Okay.
item,
Okay.
re-advertise.
You don't even need a motion to do it?
Right.
Okay. All right, that was quick.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next up is our wastewater treatment plant digester number 4, project 1810. Jeremy?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Jeremy Hoover, Senior Engineer for the City of Wenatchee. I'm here to discuss the wastewater treatment plant digester 4 project. We are in the process of getting designs put together for installation of the 4th digester out of the treatment plant. We have issued a request for qualifications earlier this year, and we hired HDR Engineering as the most qualified consultant. The first order of business was to do some investigations regarding the existing plant condition, the processes, as well as what would be required to build the new digester and the associated facilities. After the investigations were done, structural analyses, geotechnical investigations and such, we found several things that were that we had expected and a few things that we had not. The biggest item that came up was the compliance with the National Fire Protection Act. And given that the plant was built in 1957, updated in 1990, the codes have changed a little bit since then, specifically regarding explosive protection of the mechanical and electrical equipment. Net result is that the existing solids handling building cannot be retrofitted in any kind of an economical manner without a complete reconstruction in order to comply with those codes. The equipment that needs to be replaced will therefore have to be taken to a location that is remote from any kind of biogas generating facility, which basically means a new structure between digesters 3 and digesters 4. So in consulting with HDR, the new facility is beyond the scope of their original contract, and there was an additional fee that is associated with the additional design work for the new digester control building. At present, it looks like it's going to be about a 3-story facility that's going to have a lot of different types of equipment that I can go into if you want to know all the details. The consultant put together a revised statement of work as well as an associated fee structure to the tune of approximately $249,000. So I am here today to answer any questions that you might have and to recommend that the City Council authorize the mayor to sign the consultant supplement agreement number 1 on behalf of the city with HDR Engineering for the additional design services associated with the wastewater treatment plant digester 4 project.
Jeremy, my question is the projected budget and amended budget? So the only thing I see is increase in design engineering, but I don't see any other costs in their construction or anything else. Is that something that we'll see at a later date once they have something designed?
When we have actual construction level drawings, we will amend the budget, hopefully downward. We shall see. We're looking at extending the construction period about a year because of some financial constraints that we have. And once we get, the construction estimates are always a little bit on the high side to make sure there's not going to be any significant changes, a contingency, if you will. So I'm hoping that we don't have to ask for any more money in 2022, but that will be determined once we get a little bit further along during the design process.
But we are building a whole new structures.
Actually, two structures. The
That
digester.
likely will increase the cost of construction.
Potentially. The cost of the digester, it has ranged anywhere, there's a significant difference in the bottom and the top end of the projected construction cost. And there's a lot of variables that'll come into play on that one. It's probably not going to be 8.6 million, I can tell you that much, but I won't be able to give you a more specific idea until we get a little bit further along, probably 60% design. Then we'll be able to nail down the costs more specifically.
Okay, thank you.
So Jeremy, as I understand it, so we're building the digester 4, but we're also having to basically tear down and build brand new digester 3 building?
No.
Oh,
Digester 3 remains in place. We cannot take it out of service. That's part of the reason.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, no, digester 3 remains the same,
okay.
As well as solids handling building. We're not going to try to retrofit either one. We're just going to move a bunch of the new equipment that was planned to be replaced, controls, et cetera, into the new control building.
I see, okay. Now, in all the new code and requirements that are going into 4, is there some point where we're going to have to meet those requirements in 3 at some point?
The NFPA is not retroactive. You can't just go through and say, we're going to upgrade the entire plant. Every facility that was built 40 years ago has to conform. When you start making modifications to it, that's a different story. If we were to want to, say, add on another story or something along those lines, that would require bringing everything up to code in the affected areas. Mm-hmm. In this situation, it's a totally new structure, so it has to comply, but the rest of the plant is grandfathered in.
Okay, thank you.
Hasn't exploded yet, so we're good.
You
Exactly.
said biogases, I got nervous.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions for Jeremy? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion for the City Council to authorize the mayor to sign Consultant Supplement Agreement Number 1 on behalf of the city with HDR Engineering, Inc. for additional design services for the wastewater treatment plant digester number 4, project number 1810.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Huffaker, second by Councilmember Esparza, to authorize the mayor to sign the Consultant Supplemental Agreement Number 1 on behalf of the city of Wenatchee with HDR Engineering, Inc. for the additional design services for the wastewater treatment plant digester number 4, project number 1810. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, Jacob. Next up is Tacoma Avenue Improvements Project.
Good evening, Jacob Heiler, Engineering Services Manager. So I'm here tonight to talk about Tacoma Avenue. As you're aware, the city received a TIB grant towards the end of 2018 to rebuild Tacoma between Maple Street and McKittrick Street. That area is within the Chelan County PUD's water service boundary, and they've been having issues with their water main for quite some time in that street. And so what they would like to do is combine their water main replacement with our road project in order to limit the impact of the neighborhood. In order to do that, we need to have an interlocal agreement that formalizes our understandings and gives them a method to reimburse us for costs that we've incurred through both design and then construction later on. So I'm here tonight to ask for authorization for the mayor to sign an interlocal agreement with the PUD. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
So we tear up the street, they come in and put a water line in, and then we go fix it. Do they pay for any of the repairs to the streets or any of that set as part of their agreement, or are we just going to do all that as part of the grant?
So we will be, as part of the project, one contractor will be doing all the water main work as well as the road projects. And so that's the benefit of a little bit of economies of scale. And then also, if you have one contractor rather than multiple, you're a little bit more efficient in your work. therefore being in the street for a shorter duration. But anything that is associated with that water main, so the pipe, the excavation, the backfill, et cetera, will be the
Paid for by
PUD's
the PUD.
responsibility.
Thank you. Any questions for Jacob? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I move for City Council to authorize the mayor to approve the interlocal agreement between the City of Wenatchee and Public Utility District Number 1 of Chelan County, providing for the reimbursement of costs incurred with the design and construction of water line improvements associated with project number 1907.
Second?
Motion by Councilmember Harold, second by Councilmember Bailey to authorize the mayor to approve the interlocal agreement between the City of Wenatchee and the Public Utility District Number 1 of Chelan County, providing for the reimbursement of costs incurred with the design and construction of a water line improvement associated with our project number 1907. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Jacob. Lease for temporary use at the former washtop property. Matt?
All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Matt Shales, Development Project Manager, City of Wenatchee. So in front of you, you have some information and an option to consider entering into a lease for temporary use at the former washtop property. This is part of our surplus property on North Wenatchee Ave. And as you know, that property currently sits vacant, and after our first attempt at surplusing that through an RFP for purchase proposals, we unfortunately did not receive any proposals. So as staff continues to market and try to surplus that property, we are interested in allowing a temporary use out there. We received this request a few months ago, asked them to hold off while we waited to see what kind of proposals we get. Receiving none, they asked again if we would be willing to allow them to use that property and some of the buildings for the Town Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram dealership while they demo and rebuild their dealership in their current location over near Walgreens. So the term of the lease, or the time period of the lease, would be about 2.5 years. $5,000 a month plus the leasehold excise tax. Would be, after that 30-month term, would be $169,260, and then also allowing that business to continue to operate in the town of Wenatchee for that 2.5-year period. It would reduce our maintenance and upkeep associated with the property while we still hold on to that. And yeah,
So yeah, go ahead, Mark.
so any questions?
Well.
Oh, Mike, I'm sorry.
Matt, so we get to continue the sales tax because they're going to stay in the city.
Correct.
Is there a penalty for the 30-month timeline after, if they haven't completed their project at the old center? Is there a penalty in there after 30 months?
That would be a great clause and thing to think about and put into the lease.
So the answer is no? Okay.
We don't have a final.
Put it together.
Yeah, we don't have
Okay.
a lease. We're not looking at, we're looking
They're
at
just
air
getting-
here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So
For
we're gonna put that
example,
in.
your report says that we can market the property and we can show it to people. It doesn't say what happens if we're 18 months into this and we get a really hot deal and someone wants to get going. What happens to the lease that's a 30
That would be
month?
part of the lease.
Yeah. So at this point, we've been meeting with Tony Lasan, who runs the Town Auto Group, and he's shown an interest. And we talked about this a little bit at Finance and a little bit at Public Works, in that I think the bigger picture for me is, I mean, is it even worth doing? Do you just say, listen, we're just going to go market the property and we're not interested in having you stay in the interim, and if you need to go someplace, you can. And he has indicated that he would move over to his Town Nissan dealership temporarily and then move back. When we look at those sales tax numbers, that's a very punitive thing for the city, so we'd like to keep them here. And so I think we're sort of working through a lease agreement. So he sort of wants some surety because he's ready to move in sort of February or March. So we're actively negotiating terms as we speak. We don't have final terms. So your option is to give me the authority with staff to get something to the finish line. We could certainly bring you something on December 30th when we do our swearing in, if you're more comfortable with that. I think Tony's sort of interested in knowing kind of where things are at, I think fairly quickly as he's trying to sort of piece together what it is he's trying to do. He's interested in using some of the shop space out there because the shop space is still available and a little bit of the office space. So this isn't sort of a slam dunk for us other than we sort of like want to make sure he stays in our town for, you know, those 30 months. Lost sales tax would be $400,000 or more. So we are certainly trying to accommodate him. We have some property that's sort of surplus to our needs. We want to be able to show it to folks, but clearly as Tony is using it and there's a hot deal, he's going to be there for 30 months. The only issue would be if he stayed longer for some reason, it took him longer to build his facility, which we'll have to build that into the lease. What's the penalties for not leaving early? And so that's sort of and I think that's what finance talked about, a little bit about public works talked about. We sort of felt like overall, this is probably a decent deal for us for the 30-month minute. But if you guys want to wait until we get the final leases, we can currently do that as well.
Well, as long as you know the direction the city wants to go, I think we're fine with that. I'm curious, didn't we have to do a few more things with this property, like some line adjustments and things like that, or no?
Those will sort of take place over time, whether we get we don't know who's going to buy what pieces yet. So I don't see us, not like Northwest Wholesale, where we went out and went boom, 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 boom.
Right.
This is going to be, well, this hotelier wants 1.3 acres, so they'll take this parcel, that frees this. So that's got more moving. I don't think we quite know where the lines go. And as that sort of happens, we're going to be able to still accommodate if there's somebody that wants the corner of McKittrick and North Wenatchee Avenue where the old WashDOT office building was, we'll be able to accommodate that. If that happens to sell in the next, 6 months, we can accommodate that.
As long as we keep on marking it.
Yeah.
Because no matter what you have a hotel coming in, it's not like, okay, I'm going to start building tomorrow, as we all
Right.
know.
There's permitting.
They'll say, hey, I want 2.5, or she wants 2.5 acres, and here we go, this is the spot I want.
Yeah. Steve, you want to?
Sure, I was just going to, right along what Mike was saying is, it'll take a couple years for anything to get done anyway. We would still sell the property, it would just, the lease would transfer with the property. And then the other thing is we still need the McKittrick Street intersection built. So that's to be completed in 2021. So we're looking, now we're only talking about 6 months, 8 months, between those timelines of, so when we talked about it as staff and trying to weigh the pros and cons, we thought that we're probably going to have this property in our hands anyway for that period of time.
So what's our basic responsibility of the building? I see we're going to clean it out. We're going to verify that it's structurally sound. Are we providing any improvements to the heating system or anything that, nothing?
Nothing.
Just
Nope.
making sure it's not going to fall in.
We've spent a little bit of time verifying that the office building, water and heat runs, but that's all we're going to do.
Okay.
Yep.
And so they're going to take care of the modifications that they want. And
And the nice thing is, right now, your staff is out trying to maintain that and keep the sidewalks
Right.
clean and do some work, and he'll be able to take on that role for us as well in the interim. And so actually, it'll be nice to have some business activity sort of going on. The only issue for me is, are we being short-sighted here and someone walks in and wants it tomorrow and leaves and does something else? But to me, this seems like it's the right thing to do. I want to keep, I want to keep the sales tax here. It's really
I think it's a
important to us.
win-win really for us.
Yeah.
We put that property to use, kind of like Hilton Gardens. It just takes a while for those things to move and get done. I think the timing couldn't be better.
Yeah. So the policy choice is, do you want to give me the authority to get to the end, or do you guys want to see it on December 30th? And that's your call.
I'd like to go ahead and approve this resolution with the idea that the final lease will come back for approval, and I don't have a problem with that. Is that all right?
Yep.
So with that in mind, I'm going to make a motion for the city council to authorize the mayor to enter into a lease agreement with that lease being approved by city council with Town Auto Group for the temporary use and operation of a car dealership on the former WashDOT property.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Huffaker, second by Councilmember Harold, to authorize the mayor to negotiate a lease with the Town Auto Group, subject to city council's approval, for the temporary use and operation of a car dealership on the former WashDOT property. Discussion?
My question would be, what sort of signage are they going to have?
So we don't know.
Okay.
So we adopted a new sign code last week. If they came in tomorrow with some sort of a permit application, they would be allowed under our current sign code. If they come in January or February and say, hey, we're going to do this and come in, then they would have to abide by the new sign code. I don't know which one it's going to be temporary, whatever they put up. My guess is it will be under the new sign code, but I couldn't guarantee that based on when they apply.
Right.
Because there's still an open period right now where the old sign code is still available.
Except we own the property and we have to sign the application.
Yeah. Mark says we own the property.
Do we have any, is any of the property that's under the environmental cleanup and whatever, does
No.
that get involved?
No.
We get involved? with that?
Different parcel.
Okay.
They're going to be right over next to the windmill. Right, that big sort of parking
Yeah,
area
okay.
and the old shop that's back in
Yeah,
there.
right.
They're going to be their spot.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second, we've had discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Matt. All right, Confluence Parkway, Chelan County PUD Memorandum of Understanding, Mr. King.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Steve King, Economic Development Director. This agenda item is to authorize the mayor to sign and negotiate a MOU with Chelan County PUD for coordination of the NEPA process. And the reason why this memorandum of understanding is being developed is because the Confluence Parkway runs through a considerable part of the PUD-owned project land under their FERC license, which means that we have two federal agencies that we're working with, Federal Highways Administration for the road project and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And so, rightly so, we've been working with the PUD, and that's a very complicated process. We need to understand roles and responsibilities, and so that the MOU that we're developing will define those roles and responsibilities. Your packet has a tremendous amount of detailed information around NEPA. That is the basis for what the process outlines. It's taken us about a year to work through developing this memo that's attached in your packet. So there will actually be a formal MOU, but this memo of detail is what's the meat of the MOU.
Can we make it any more complicated?
Oh, boy.
Don't ask.
This is all drafted by their attorneys?
This is drafted by our consultants. Their attorneys are also drafting their version of it too. So we're bringing those together to merge those.
So what are we being asked to approve tonight? The idea that we're going to go into an MOU once both drafts have been merged together?
Yes, yes.
So we'll see this again?
Yes. We cannot get a permit to do the work on the property, and so that's why we want to get this authorization, so we can actually get permits to do our environmental work until we have a signed MOU, so. Yeah.
Steve, as we get further down the road on this thing, are we going to, do you anticipate us running into some very serious roadblocks from the feds because there's property sales and all those kinds of things, or property transfers and all those kinds of things that are part of this? Does that get us to the point where this thing becomes really more complicated than it even appears when you read it?
Well, so there's a lot of detail in how you actually get that done. So what this outlines is, at the conclusion of NEPA, when you figure out what all your impacts are and mitigations are, there would be a transfer of PUD property to the city for Confluence Parkway right-of-way. Mm-hmm. In order to do that, they have to get an amendment to their FERC license. Mm-hmm. And in order to get an amendment to the FERC license, you have to follow all the rules that their license spells out for amending that. And so it's effectively, we're preparing an environmental assessment that complies with Federal Highways Administration rules and FERC rules. And so we'll submit the same environmental assessment. It's just that our environmental assessment will be bigger than a normal one because it's also complying with the FERC rules. And so that's what all that detail is covering, is how do you do that? It's quite involved. It's a lot of, when you get into the language, it's a lot of language, but the principle is just as I described. It's actually a simple principle, but a lot of I's and T's.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad this is you, not me, Steve.
Well, we need to go forward, so I'll make a motion for the city council to authorize the mayor to negotiate and sign a memorandum of understanding between the Chelan County PUD and the city of Wenatchee for the purposes of NEPA compliance for Confluence Parkway.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Poyer, second by Councilmember Markart, to authorize the mayor to negotiate and sign a memorandum of understanding between the Chelan County PUD and the city of Wenatchee for the purposes of NEPA compliance for Confluence Parkway. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Stella Street annexation, Brooklyn. And Rob.
Keeping you on your toes.
All right.
Good evening. I'll open this up, just give you a little bit of background, and then Brooklyn will walk you through the annexation portion of it. So for those of you that have been up to the Public Service Center, there's a portion of Stella that's just north of our property there, from there over to Walnut, that was county right-of-way. It's a main route for Link, for all the entering and exiting of the Public Service Center traffic, trucks, et cetera. And if you recall, that road was in terrible condition. So about a year ago, we began discussions with the county about maintenance of that road and the condition of it. And we came to an agreement that we would share in the cost of the preservation of that road, the overlay of it, if we would agree to annex it. And it was, I don't know the history on it, but it was sort of an outlier for some reason. When the area to the east of Stella was annexed into the city, that right-of-way was left out. And we don't know the history of that or the reason, but it just made sense to bring that in. It is one of our main transportation routes. It's actually a bypass to the parallels Wenatchee Avenue. So we came to an agreement. The city went ahead and did do the paving this fall because we wanted to get it done before the winter. They've agreed to share in 50% of those costs, and then we'll now own and maintain that from here forward. And so Brooklyn will walk you through the annexation, and because it's not a property annexation, it's a relatively simple matter that our city attorney has helped us out with.
Yeah. So the ordinance 2019-34 in front of you approves both the agreement for getting the reimbursement from Chelan County and then also the annexation. Because the RCW allows counties and cities to make an agreement to adjust boundary lines when it's related to just right-of-way and not personal property, we're able to do this without a public hearing or the normal annexation process. After the ordinance, the normal annexation process through OFM and the state will progress. We'll still have to do all the census information, but that's a simple process on the front end. So the ordinance in front of you includes both the agreement and then also a requirement that has Chelan County adopting also a resolution that both agrees to the annex and the agreement. So they've done that earlier in the month, and so if there's any questions on that process, happy to answer them.
So just for clarification.
Talking to the microphone.
Just for clarification, the properties on the west are not annexed into the city as of yet?
No, that's still
Okay, so
part
that's
of.
still county?
Yeah, that's part of one of those kind of island areas that we have there, yeah.
So I think generally speaking, this is something we most of the time wouldn't do unless we got the residential portions of it with it. But because the condition of the road was so poor and we were going to repave it anyhow, and they agreed to pave half of it and we can drive our snowplow down the road just as easy as they can, they really wanted us to take this on. And so I know this is slightly different than our normal policies would be, but as we learned last night, we can adjust our policies from time to time. So this seems to make sense for us to be able just to maintain it and take care of the road, and eventually it'll get annexed in. We're just a little ahead.
And it was a gap as well, so we're not just annexing in a new street and changing that, it was a gap. So we had the south part of Stella and north, it was just a gap in between that intersection at Stella and Walnut. So we're just completing that section.
So will our plans be to improve that and get some sidewalks in there, or what's the plans after it's annexed in?
yes, we will, we would submit it for grant funding if it comes up. We do have some development occurring on there that will install approximately about 100 feet of sidewalk from the Public Service Center going north. That'll be done by the Deer Haven multifamily project probably in 2020.
Yeah.
And without us annexing that in, that might not happen. Does the county have rules that would have required them to do that?
They would have also required the section of sidewalk with the developer. But we also, with the paving project, we were able to go in there and do some gravel shoulders. We now have, it's even just safer just now in the work that we've done this year. The residents, the residents on the east side of the road are Wenatchee residents, and they're very, very pleased that we came in and did this. So.
And the Deer Haven one that's a city project. That's
It is.
inside the city limits,
Okay.
so they're building
Yeah.
that to city code.
Yeah.
At that intersection, they're on that kind of northeast corner of it.
Well, I've walked that road many times. It's part of our walking route, and it can be dangerous at times, just because the road itself is in bad condition and people are swerving to miss potholes, and there is no sidewalk in a lot of it. So.
There's still no sidewalk. There should be fewer potholes because
There's fewer potholes.
What's that?
There's fewer potholes. I drive it.
Okay.
That's next to Foothills Middle School, so maybe like safe routes to school for sidewalks?
Yeah.
Now that it's in the city, that becomes a possibility. Yeah.
Good. Well, Your Honor, I will make a motion for City Council to adopt ordinance number 2019-34 to fully include the public right-of-way known as Stella Avenue within the corporate limits of the City of Wenatchee and authorize the mayor to sign and enter into an agreement with Chelan County to share equally the cost of $16,836 with 49 cents to overlay the unincorporated segment of Stella Avenue.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Esparza, second by Councilmember Harold, to adopt ordinance 2019-34, fully include the public right-of-way known as Stella Avenue within the corporate limits of the city of Wenatchee and authorize the mayor to sign and enter into an agreement with Chelan County to share equally the cost of $16,836.49 to overlay the unincorporated segment of Stella Avenue. Questions for staff? Comments? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Brooklyn. Thanks, Rob. All right, does that conclude the meeting? Oh, there's more. All right. So we have two public hearing items this evening. The first being regarding business and occupation tax. So generally speaking, the way a public hearing will go is we will hear initially from staff. We will then turn it over to any members of the public that wish to address the council. We would ask that you stick, we have a 3-minute sort of rule around here, so we'd ask that you stick to 3 minutes. Tammy is the timekeeper, so when you hear her beep, 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 we'd ask that you conclude your comments. That would be the end of your 3 minutes. And so I would, Peter, I know we talked a little bit about a PILT agreement. Do we have one to consider tonight, or is that not under consideration? All right, thank you. All right. So I'll turn it over to our staff, and then we'll turn it over to the public for any hearing they may have. So,
Okay. Good evening, Allison Williams, Executive Services Director, here together with
Brad Posenjack.
Talk into the microphone.
Brad Posenjack, Finance Director.
Steve Smith, City Attorney.
So we're here tonight to provide an overview for your consideration of a limited B&O tax. And first, we wanted to provide you with background for how this came about. Looking back on our history, we went through a period of time from 2008 to 2013 where the city was looking seriously at our finances, and it really took a community-wide effort to come together and look at our city in terms of future sustainability. And the mayor appointed a sustainability committee to come together and look at every potential opportunity there was to put mechanisms into place for the future of the city, to maintain the work that we do. And just to look at a couple of the trends back then, in 2008, sales taxes, $7.6 million, and by 2013 had declined to $6.2 million. And at that same time, we were looking forward in terms of our budget projections, 2014 through 2019, looking at a general fund with recurring revenues of, in 2019 at that time of 21.9 million and recurring expenditures of 24.1. And so that was a dramatic change in terms of how the city was operating, and we needed to do some serious work in order to look at our future sustainability. And so the committee pulled together a packet of information. Staff provided them with substantial information. They looked at nearly 35 options for different ways that the city could be doing business. And they came back to the City Council in 2014 with recommendations, 11 of them, and you put that into practice. And so the City Council took great action in that time. Old Station was annexed. We annexed our fire service into Chelan County Fire Protection District Number 1 with a positive vote of both the city and the district voters. We looked at all of our properties and what we should be doing with them to make sure that they were providing the maximum impact to the city. And so you established an economic development program and transitioned or sold surplus properties. And we're still in that process, looking at, we talked tonight about the USDO or the WSDOT property that is not providing property tax to us. And we're looking at major redevelopment there so that that property becomes contributing to the city. We're limited in our land base, and so we need to make sure that every property that we have is contributing to the overall good of the city. We transitioned the museum to its own nonprofit, and we looked again at all of our properties and identified that we had significant properties that are owned and operated by entities that are exempt from property taxes. And so that is where we landed on this idea of what mechanisms did we have for those properties. Options included, after analysis across the nation, cities look at their sustainability and how they're going to provide those basic services, police services, land use services, public works, the things that we do. And you look at our general fund budget, 25 million now, and the people that we employ and the work that we put out that creates a great place that business can be conducted. And so the options, payment in lieu of taxes, is used across the country. A lot on the East Coast where they have universities that have substantial holdings. B&O tax, again, is a mechanism. There is a statewide B&O tax, and in your packet you had a list of cities that employ that as a mechanism for use, and that is what is before you tonight. And at that time we also looked at a per employee business license fee, and there were legal reasons why that could not be further explored. So in 2017, we brought this same question before you, payment in lieu of tax or B&O tax option, limited, looking at, again, the nonprofit entities. And we ended up negotiating a 1-year, $330,000 payment in lieu of taxes with Confluence. And as we went through our budget process this year, we are entering into another time of austerity. We are looking forward and looking at providing the services that we do. We have a whole new complexion of services that the city is being called to provide these days. We look at the homeless program that has been developed and the extent to which that is impacting our police services. And so what we're being called to do as a city is far greater, I think, than in the past. So the basis for the budget item this year, again, we looked at that PILT that was paid one time in 2018. And so as we went through the budget process this year, again, it was requested that we bring forward this item and we incorporated a line item in this year's budget, which you approved in November. We did go through a process. We have a couple of copies of the balance sheet for Confluence. Went out to the state website to grab those to establish a B&O. There is a cap in the ordinance as it is presented, which Steve will describe. And again, you have the statewide B&O tax information in your packets. And we just wanted to provide a little perspective on property tax. Cities are limited in the ways that we can generate revenues for the work that we do. And when property tax amounts are established and levied, if there are nonprofit entities, that tax is shifted to those entities and property owners that do pay taxes. As a valley, we have been looking at efforts to be resilient as a valley, and we have looked seriously at property taxes. We look at other regions where they have worked to bring high-value property tax-paying entities into their regions. And we look at Quincy and their data farms. You all know the processes that we've been through to look at what those data farms have done for that community and their ability to build a $100 million high school. We in this area struggle to pass a bond for our high schools, and they're sorely needed. This has been an effort as a region to look at our valley and the contributors. And when we put together the sustainability effort, that really was an effort to bring together the community and look at this from a corporate standpoint and what it takes to keep a community healthy. And so I just wanted to remind you all that at that time, West and Stamil led the effort for the annexation of Old Station. At that time, their properties generated $405,000 in property taxes. And they opted into the annexation, bringing their properties into the city, knowing full well there were utility taxes and other taxes that they paid. But the importance of keeping our city healthy was critical to them as a company and to the region and what our city provides. And so that was estimated at that time $191,000 extra. So we are here tonight to ask for your consideration, and Steve is here to provide an overview of the ordinance. And Brad is here to weigh in on any additional finances that we may have missed in the presentation. So.
Thanks, Allison. So I'm just going to go over the key points of the ordinance. First of all, the authority for the city to enact an ordinance like this comes from the state legislature, and the legislature is authorized by the Washington Constitution to enable cities to assess and collect taxes for municipal purposes. And the legislature, in our case, has authorized code cities, which the city of Wenatchee is, to impose an excise tax for revenue with regard to business, occupations, and professions. So you have an ordinance before you tonight. It's ordinance 2019-44. The purpose of this proposed ordinance is to impose a business and occupation tax on the gross income of the business or gross proceeds of sales on professional healthcare services within the city. It's limited to that. The tax is 0.2% on businesses engaging in nonprofit professional healthcare services. It has a qualifier of a business with gross income in excess of $20 million per year, and the tax is capped at $600,000 in total tax in any 1 year. The gross income of the business is the value of the gross proceeds of sales and compensation received for rendition of services. The ordinance has provisions for apportioning gross income that's earned within the city and income that's earned elsewhere. So if there was a business that came within the realm of this ordinance that did business outside of our community, we'd have to apportion that gross income. And if it's not easily done, there's a formula in the ordinance that allows us to do it. And it's basically a fraction based on total income within the city versus total income from all places. The ordinance provides that the tax is actually a tax on the business entity itself. It's not a tax on its customers. It's based on the gross income of the taxpayer. It's a cost of doing business, or in other words, a portion of the overhead of the business of the taxpayer. You might recall this is similar to the utility tax that we impose on Chelan County PUD on our utilities. It's actually based on the gross income. It's not on the amount they collect from their customer. Depending on the individual taxpayer that would be paying under this ordinance, the cost could be passed on to its customers through higher fees, or it could just be absorbed by the taxpayer, resulting in a lower net operating margin or lower net income. The ordinance has a referendum procedure. The law with respect to the passing of B&O tax requires that there be a referendum process included in the ordinance. The way that works is that if the ordinance is passed, a petitioner can file a petition within 7 days of approval of the ordinance. If that occurs, then within 10 days, we need to have a ballot title written by the Chelan County Auditor. Once that's done, then the petitioner has 30 days to gather signatures of 15% of the registered voters of the city that voted in the last general election. And if enough signatures are gathered, then it goes on the next ballot for a vote by the public. And the effective date of the ordinance is the later of April 1, 2020, or the conclusion of any referendum process if that got started. So those are the key points of the ordinance. This ordinance is a model ordinance mandated by the state. So I apologize, it's pretty convoluted and has a lot of information in there that we really are not implementing here, but it has to be in there. So it's a little confusing when you read it at first blush. But these are the key elements with respect to how we would implement it.
So in essence, we're required to adopt all the state definitions and all the state.
Yeah, even though they pertain to things that we're not taxing, like manufacturing, digital services, all that kind of stuff.
Steve, when you researched this ordinance, did you look at other cities that have already done this and look at what they have implemented for ordinances, especially since that it's kind of a focused ordinance?
I did. Yeah, I looked at a couple others. They're basically similar, the same format because they're the model ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any examples of cities that you looked at that close by to us?
Well, Bellingham is probably the one I remember the best.
Okay. Talk to me about the 15% of the registered voters that voted last time. What are you saying?
So that has to do with the referendum process. So if a petition is filed, a ballot title is written, and then they have to go out and gather signatures on that petition equal to 15% of the voters in the last city election.
That voted?
Yes.
Wow.
Registered.
That's not.
So what did we have? What?
That's tough.
1,100 voters?
Well,
How does that?
so a little clarity, the ordinance, one of the provisions says petitioner has 30 days in which to secure the signatures of not less than 15% of the registered voters of the city as of the last municipal general election. So
That voted. I think.
Yeah, the words that voted are not in there.
I have that in my memo. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But at some point, that'll get clarified in the future, whether it's 15% of registered voters or 15% of those that voted in the last general election.
Yeah, if it happens, we've got to comply with that. Whatever.
Yeah, so that'll get sorted out at some point. They're clearly different numbers, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's not registered voters. It's that voted in the last
It
election.
would be
I'm sure.
consistent with the referendum provisions, like when we did our island annexation.
Exactly. It's the same
And
process.
that was those who voted, it's a percentage of those who voted in the last election.
Good job.
Well, you got to find the right people.
All right, any other questions for Steve? Brad, do you have anything to add?
No, Stephen Allison did a great job.
Okay. Any questions of the staff before we turn it over to the public for their testimony? All right, thanks, Allison, Brad, Steve. So I'm not sure how we want to do this, how many folks are going to testify. I think, Peter, you got a group for the start, okay? And then once your group's done, you'll tell us, and then we'll have folks raise hands and have them come up and
We have about 5 people that would like to speak for 3 minutes.
Perfect.
I will speak for 3 minutes.
So you got to make sure you speak into the microphone so our folks at home can listen.
How do we get our slides up here?
Yeah, just give us just a minute, Peter. They'll get them up.
Then you only have 2 minutes left. Takes a minute.
I'm watching that big clock right up there. Don't worry. Thanks, Mike.
We're supposed to wait.
Over there. I'm teasing him.
All right, Peter.
Yes, go ahead.
Mayor and Wenatchee City Council members, thank you very much for the opportunity to comment on the proposed Wenatchee City Ordinance 2019-44. My name is Patricia Wachtel. My home address is 10 North Miller Street, and I work for Chelan County PUD. I am speaking tonight as the chairman of the Confluence Health Board of Directors, which is composed currently of 8 community members and 6 physicians who are residents of North Central Washington. With the recent resignation of Mayor Kuntz from the Confluence Health Board, we currently have 1 community member board position open. Confluence Health and its affiliates, Central Washington Hospital and Wenatchee Valley Hospital, are IRS 501c3 nonprofit healthcare entities. Confluence Health is a community and regional asset. It is governed by the Confluence Health Board, which sets priorities for the organization and assures these priorities and strategic goals are met. It is centered on our mission to improve patients' health by providing safe and high-quality care in a compassionate and cost-effective manner. This organization not only serves the City of Wenatchee residents, but residents and visitors of the entire north central region of our state. Confluence Health and the City of Wenatchee services to the community are intertwined and mutually dependent of each other for its success and or failures. Confluence Health is opposed to proposed Ordinance 2019-44 for the following reasons. It would appear from our reading of the proposed ordinance that Confluence Health would be the only organization impacted. This is unorthodox, and the targeted approach of this tax highly suspect and possibly illegal based on our legal evaluation. It sets a precedent of taxing legally designated nonprofit organizations, and this is a very slippery slope. It is suggesting to Confluence Health that what it contributes to the benefit of the region is not sufficient, that the benefits of the tax-exempt status are not currently being given back to the region in services and community good, despite our significant charitable, patient, and social services and various contributions made to the community. Methow Park is one of the most recent examples. Due to a multitude of factors, Confluence Health does not possess unlimited financial resources. This ordinance, if implemented, will negatively affect the ability of Confluence Health to offer healthcare services at the current level and otherwise contribute to the well-being of the region as it does now. This could inadvertently and adversely affect our most vulnerable residents. Other individuals from Confluence Health will provide additional details on the outlooks of Confluence Health from a financial and regional demographic standpoint, components of our business model, and available services perspective regarding the effects of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Corey Ferrari Zimmerman, and I reside at 1653 Holly Lane in East Wenatchee. And I've had the pleasure of working for Confluence Health for the last 5.5 years. In the City of Wenatchee, it is true that we operate healthcare facilities at Central Washington Hospital and Wenatchee Valley Hospital that are tax exempt and do not pay property taxes. Yet, other property that we own, we pay property taxes on. Central Washington Hospital obtained not-for-profit status in 1935, which exempts the property from paying property tax. Based on a recent interview by the mayor of Wenatchee, it appears that the City of Wenatchee is attempting to recover taxes that have not been received in the last 84 years. Because the federal government recognizes us as a not-for-profit. While discussions may occur regarding the change in status for Wenatchee Valley Hospital, the underlying fact remains that the City of Wenatchee was never harmed by the change to not-for-profit status, as confirmed by the Chelan County Assessor. In addition, we do pay sales tax on items identified by the state of Wenatchee or state of Washington as taxable. Of the 8.4% sales tax rate, 1% goes directly to the City of Wenatchee, while 0.9% is for special assessments, like the Town Toyota Center. For 2019, the City of Wenatchee will have received sales tax to the general fund not related to special assessments, of over $500,000 directly related to Confluence Health business. We employ roughly 4,200 employees, of which over 2,900, along with their families, work within the Wenatchee city limits. Over 1,600 of these employees live within the Wenatchee city limits. These employees work every day to improve the health and quality of life for all residents of North Central Washington. We value our sense of community and in many ways define ourselves as being effective if all other businesses in the region are successful because our staff and their loved ones are healthy, productive, and have a maximized quality of life. On any given day, just over 50% of the hospitalized patients we care for, as well as 60% of the outpatient visits receiving medical services, are not Wenatchee residents. This means that the city of Wenatchee benefits from individuals who would not normally come to Wenatchee, yet due to that care we provide, do, and thus local businesses, as well as the city of Wenatchee, benefit. We are unique when compared with other healthcare delivery systems in our scope of services provided and the quality of our staff in a relatively geographically isolated area. The quality and cost effectiveness of our cancer care, orthopedic care, cardiac care, stroke care, and acute rehabilitation, to name a few, are recognized throughout the state and nationally by organizations in the medical field. Our current net operating margin for Confluence is 2.64%. This margin and the depreciation each year is reinvested into the infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. Those your daughters running for Apple Blossom?
Yeah.
I saw the last name and I thought it had to be you. Congratulations on that. Hey, Stu.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, my name is Stu Freed. I reside at 427 Douglas Street, so it was a quick walk for me. I am the Chief Medical Officer at Confluence Health. I wanted to share with you some components of our business model you might not be aware of. Confluence Health has a compassionate care program which provides care to provide not out-of-pocket expense care for patients who are at or under 200% of the federal poverty level. We also provide reduced expense care for any patient at 400 or less % of the federal poverty level. In 2019, we're on track to provide about $13 million of this care at no expense to these patients. It's important to point out that about 35% of these folks have insurance, but they can't afford their deductible or copay. Confluence is expecting to have about $15 million in uncollectible debt this year. Annually, we contribute $250,000 matched by Wenatchee Valley Medical Group to multiple organizations in this region, the vast majority of which are nonprofits, who work to either improve the health or well-being or quality of life of the residents in North Central Washington. In 2019, there was an additional call for these contributions of $50,000. We contributed the $50,000, that was also matched by Wenatchee Valley Medical Group. In addition, Confluence Health matches $160,000 of employee donations to the nonprofit organization of their choice. Our case managers and social service work at Central Washington Hospital provide transportation expense, hotel expense, assisted living costs, in-home caregiver costs, medical supply and medical equipment expenses for patients who have no other way to pay for these items. We do this routinely at a total annual expenditure of roughly $162,000 a year. I think it's important to understand that these contributions take place year in and year out, and we do this because it's the right thing to do.
Thanks, Stu.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Tracy Kasnick. I live at 430 George Johnson in Wenatchee, and I'm the Chief Nursing Officer for Confluence Health. There are multiple services provided by Confluence Health that do not contribute to a positive bottom line, but they are the right thing to do. These include trauma care. It's very expensive for both emergent care and outpatient follow-up. State funding provides $28,000 a year. MU1, it's a medical surgical unit for involuntary detained patients voluntary patients, and geriatric behavioral health patients, the average reimbursement is less than 25% of billed charges. Outpatient behavioral health. We've expanded from 6 providers in 2013 to almost 50 currently. It includes psychologists, psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, and counselors. 12 are integrated into primary care clinics. This also includes the ongoing work we are doing combating the opioid crisis. Confluence Health has assumed operation for outpatient clinics in several north central Washington communities when other entities walked away. It's kept primary care in those communities. We're a teaching center. It's amazing the number of healthcare students we train annually, and that includes medical students. In 2018, approximately 1,900 students had clinical rotations at any one of our sites. None of that is reimbursed. Unfortunately, security has become an increasing need in the past several years. We have added 24 security officers to Central Washington Hospital, Wenatchee Valley Hospital, as well as Moses Lake and OMAC campuses. Without those security officers, we would be having Wenatchee PD responding daily to our emergency department. Homelessness also impacts Confluence Health. At any given time, there are 6 or 7 patients who no longer need medical care but are too medically fragile and have no safe discharge plan. These patients are kept anywhere from days to months until safe placement can be found. And since 1997, Central Washington Hospital has offered the only sexual assault nurse examiner program in the 4-county area. Most of the exams have little or no compensation, and we have not received any funding from either the city or county in several years. We do this and all of these things because it's the right thing to do.
Thanks, Tracy.
Oh, it's your turn. No, you're next.
Mr. Mayor, council people. My name is Gus Heineke. I live in Wenatchee, or East Wenatchee. I work for Columbia Fruit Packers, and I'm a board member. Thank you for your time. Fully recognize how healthcare delivery bears on the infrastructure of the city. But is it any more impactful per individual than any other nonprofit or government agency such as the public schools, churches, college, or the social service agencies? We can relate to the economic challenges that the city is facing as we also face similar shortfalls. The current ordinance, as drafted, is targeted just to our organization, and in general, taxing a nonprofit organization is a slippery slope. It sets a precedent that implies that nonprofits do not commit and contribute enough to a community's well-being as they receive in tax deductions and benefits. If implemented, it would require additional difficult decisions by Confluence Health that could negatively affect various programs that have already been mentioned, affecting not just the city of Wenatchee, but the region itself. Section 5.112.120 of the ordinance notes that this tax is to be considered part of the overhead and not levied onto our patients. We interpret that to mean that we cannot raise our prices. Yet the city is raising taxes by assessing a B&O tax on our services, and that tax is being levied solely on Confluence Health. If the tax is absorbed as overhead, then the implications will trickle down and that we will not be able to replace equipment that is essential in the care that you receive at Confluence Health. The aging equipment, which we replace yearly, the renovations we perform on our buildings, and any future programs and community support will suffer. It is not realistic for the city of Wenatchee to expect that a B&O tax imposed solely on one entity will not have a dramatic impact on the quality of care or cost of care that we provide.
Thanks,
Thank
Gus.
Mayor and council, I'm Peter Rutherford. I am the CEO of Confluence Health. and I live at 2105 Ione Street in the city of Wenatchee and have for 30 years. I want to give you just a little bit of a perspective and some past history and discuss the process of this. So as far as past history, Central Washington Hospital approximately 20 years ago purchased 20 acres in northern part of East Wenatchee, south of the Obadashian Bridge, for a proposed plan to move the hospital and hopefully Wenatchee Valley Medical Center to a healthcare campus. Wenatchee Valley Medical Center at the time decided not to support this proposal because of the financial costs of building a new campus and the question as to whether that was an appropriate use of limited healthcare dollars. And also a significant concern regarding moving healthcare services out of the city and questioning whether that would affect timely access. Central Washington Hospital continued to evaluate this proposal, but in the end decided not to do it and to make further improvements on the current campus, most recently a parking garage. A major component of this decision was the concern regarding the economic hole that would have been left in South Wenatchee with a now unused older building. During the economic downturn of 2008 through 2010, the Economic Sustainability, as Allison Williams pointed out, committee was formed to assess the city's future financial needs. I was part of that committee. The committee did, as Allison pointed out, make several recommendations and recommending all of them be implemented. One of those was the employee head tax, but the city council, for a variety of reasons, elected not to do that. Subsequently, Confluence Health was asked whether to consider making a voluntary donation to the city, which was discussed at the board, but was declined as no other nonprofits were willing to participate in a similar program. Subsequently, the city approached the Confluence board with a payment in lieu of taxes, and we met with 2 of the members of the council regarding that. Confluence did agree to a 1-year program to allow the city to explore other nonprofits to participate in a similar program, and Confluence Health at that time was hoping to set an example. The year ended and no further nonprofits were apparently interested, and so the board decided not to continue that program. Since that decision, there has been no contact between the city and Confluence Health regarding a PILT or B&O tax until mid-November 2019. As far as the process, we were aware that there were some rumors that a business and occupation tax had been discussed by the city and city council. However, we became aware of this potential B&O tax when I was contacted by Confluence Health board members and a physician member about the B&O tax being approved and in the final budget. I then called Mayor Kuntz, who informed me that the council needed additional funds to hire the police officers to deal with an increase in the homeless population downtown. Apparently at a city finance committee, there had been an ask, and it was stated that Confluence should be taxed. I asked for a copy of the ordinance and resolution, and the mayor stated that it was still being drafted and he would send it to me when it was completed. I received the ordinance on November the 20th. This is after the budget had been approved. I subsequently contacted the mayor on Thanksgiving Day and discussed that this tax proposal would be likely a disruptive matter for this city. The mayor offered to look into the option of a PILT, but was unwilling to include other nonprofit organizations. A 10-year increasing scale PILT proposal was presented. The option for the PILT was then discussed at a Confluence Health board meeting, and due to the unilateral nature of the proposal, a lack of clarity as to the reasoning behind the degree of funds requested, it was not supported by the board. The question of the need for police officers is not the question, rather the priorities of city spending and revenue needs. This brings us to tonight. There are several process concerns which I have. Number 1, Confluence Health was never notified for the intent of this business and occupation tax to be in the 2020 budget, and other than my discussions with the mayor on Thanksgiving Day, there have been no discussions, except for some discussions with individual city council members over the last couple of days. Number 2, there have been no discussions prior to tonight with Confluence Health regarding the impact of this business and occupation tax on Confluence Health.
Number 3, there has been no discussion of Confluence Health's impact on the city, either its pros or cons, before tonight. Number 4, we are now scrambling to answer and address the questions and issues in an objective manner. This is the due diligence which should have been done long before an event such as this evening. Number 5, this process I perceive to be rushed, inaccurate, and not thoughtful. It is a discussion that has significant precedent and significant potential for unintended and unrecognized consequences. We will be a changed community because of this effort. There has been a lack of an opportunity for participation by all involved parties. This will lead to a lack of trust going forward, and that is a significant loss. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. All right, anybody else? So I suggest a raising of hands of those and some sort of orderly just over to the side and come on up. Just someone walk up here. Looks like we got 10 or 12 folks, so.
2 at a time.
Yes, please. Do you want us to go before you? Do you want to go before us?
I'll be quick.
Okay,
Garn Christensen, Douglas County community member, also superintendent for Eastmont Schools. I've learned in my business, fair is a 4-letter word, and it's one of those most important ones. Whether you're in public service or elected positions, you're tasked with administering rules, regulations in a fair manner. When I look at the issue before you tonight, you're in a difficult situation. The demands upon those of us in public service never end. There will always be more asks. There will always be more services required. There'll always be needy people that we could contribute and improve the quality of their life. At the same time, any one of us could have a heart attack in this next week. I've only been on the Confluence board less than a year, a little over a year, and I've learned we've had discussions. What's the level of heart service we provide? What are the different levels of medical care in the different specialties? It's a complex organization. They look very, very deeply at everything they do. They try to make sure that they're providing the highest quality service that meets the needs of this community. I go back to the heart attack. They've got 2 teams, I understand, that will be there within 30 minutes at the hospital ready to help you. They just purchased a robot because the surgeons that are coming out of school, and this is a $2 million robot, are asking to have that so they can provide better quality care for any one of you should you need that service tonight. These decisions aren't made just on a whim. They're not made for profit. They're made on behalf of this community. So when you think about what you want your medical health providers in this community, I've learned that Confluence has a really complex task. If you think of your own medical world as a patient, theirs is even more difficult as a business. They're mixing federal, state, local, people who don't have any resources and still trying to put together the best service possible. Once again, if you choose to do this, I would hope you'd expand your tax and include nonprofits in addition to the Confluence, because I think, once again, you need to be fair. Thank you and good luck.
Thanks, Garn.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Shyla Burgess. I'm the Executive Director of the Wenatchee Valley Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce is located at 137 North Wenatchee Avenue. I personally have the privilege of residing at 1605 Easy Street, even though life is not always easy on Easy Street. I'm here on behalf of the Chamber Board, a member of the Advocacy Committee, several of which are in the room tonight, but Jess Monette to my left and I are charged with speaking. It's probably not going to come to a surprise to all of you because many of you I've spoken to, but the Wenatchee Valley Chamber of Commerce opposes the City of Wenatchee implementing a B&O tax, especially without properly informing and engaging the greater business community in this conversation under the reasoning that it only applies to one business. Although the ordinance before you is currently limited to a nonprofit health service provider, the greater business community and nonprofit sector has a right to know that the city is considering a significant change in our tax structure for businesses by establishing a B&O tax that can be applied to additional, if not all, businesses in Wenatchee at any time. The Wenatchee Valley Chamber of Commerce strives to be the leader in creating a more vibrant and prosperous business climate in our region by championing our community's quality of life and economic vitality through collaborative leadership and sound business advocacy.
To keep lines of communication open between the chamber and this body, we invite a representative to join us and participate in chamber board meetings. This representative has failed to bring this to the chamber board's attention, so like others tonight, we have been caught by surprise without significant notification of a change in our business climate. Tonight, we are asking you to boldly vote no. But if that is not possible, that you would lay this issue down and allow the rest of us to be brought along with you in this discussion to fully understand not only the magnitude of the impact on the community, but the greater business community and the nonprofit sector. We have additional concerns with the constitutionality of the tax proposal that you are currently considering, and to speak to that, Jess is here with me.
Good evening, council members, Mr. Mayor. My name is Jess Monette. I'm an attorney here in Wenatchee. I live at 1035 Monroe Street. Tonight, I'm here as a member of the board, Wenatchee Valley Chamber of Commerce, as well as a member, I believe I'm the vice chair of the Chamber's Advocacy Committee. I know many of you, I work with some of you. I had Mr. Bailey as my civics teacher a couple decades back.
Wouldn't he be proud of us now?
Yeah, that's right. Maybe. And tonight, I think that what the council is considering is a very significant action. What the council is considering tonight is the city of Wenatchee imposing a tax that currently does not exist in the city of Wenatchee. One of the reasons why businesses come to the city of Wenatchee is for our valley, for the beautiful mountains, for the recreational opportunities, and for our business climate. And we all know, as we've seen with issues such as minimum wage and other things, that cities can make a name for themselves as being a place that you want to start a business, run a business, continue a business, or a place you don't. And that's something that this institution, this council should consider tonight. I do have a couple of things that I'd like to mention that for the commission to consider. I think one of the questions that hasn't had a lot of discussion tonight is the constitutionality of this tax. As I understand it, this tax is based in RCW 3521-710 and also the Washington State Constitution's Article 7, Section 1. Okay, both of those require uniformity of taxation. And I trust that your city attorney has rendered an opinion on the constitutionality of this tax, but I call on each of you to ask yourself, is what you are doing constitutional? And I think that this gets to Mr. Christensen's point about fairness. What the City Council is doing today is picking out one group, Confluence Health, and they are saying we are taking tax from you. From the Chamber's position, from the business community's position, we look at that and we ask the question, okay, Confluence today, when a couple of police officers are needed, what's to stop it from being my business tomorrow when other city needs are needed? This is a city government. The city government is always going to have some new crisis, some new need for funds. And we look at this and ask, what is the limiting principle? And it appears to me that there is none. I would also ask the city to keep in mind that if Confluence knows what's good for them, they will most certainly challenge this in court. And I think that the city needs to ask the question, how much are we going to pay to defend a tax that we may lose on? Because those are going to be sunk costs and those are going to be out-of-pocket costs immediately, and we don't know where that will end. We would ask that the City Council vote no on this proposal, and we would do so on behalf of the business community in the City of Wenatchee so that the City of Wenatchee can continue to be a vibrant place for business and a vibrant place to raise families. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Come on up, whoever's next. I won't even make you raise your hand. Just come on up.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, my name is Wilma Cartagena. I am the current president of the North Central Washington Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I am a resident of Douglas County, 121 Crestview Drive in Orondo. Our chamber charter encompasses all of North Central Washington, including the city of Wenatchee. I have been asked to be present today to provide the council some feedback in regards to the new proposed ordinance that we are discussing today. I have read the text of the ordinance and understand that the proposed tax is likely to affect one of our major employers in the area, that being Confluence Health. As a general rule, we oppose any tax that increases the cost of doing business for any small businesses or all businesses. We understand that the city has needs to raise revenues, and we also understand that when we raise taxes, the burden is often passed to the end consumer, and often disproportionately affects the most disadvantaged, those being the poor and communities of color. Such targeted tax impacting a major employer in an area is unfair and likely to have a ripple effect that will affect our community. In January, the cost of doing business will go up due to state-mandated regulations, so we believe that it is not in the best interest of our community to also be raising taxes on businesses without further discussion with the entire business community. As such, we ask the City Council and the members to consider the impact of such taxation and reconsider its institution and vote no on this tax. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
I'm going to scoot over so I'm not leaning over your computer. Dina Walter, Chelan County Assessor, and I apologize, I don't weigh that much, but I broke your table back there. And I'm here in my official capacity, so you either need a refund or bill the county. Sorry about that. So my concern, and I want to make it abundantly clear here, I am not for or against the B&O. I'm not here to take a position. I don't have an opinion on whether this is good or bad. My only interest is that factual information be relayed. I read, after numerous people called me and asked me questions, I read the news article in the newspaper and immediately noted that there was some erroneous information in there. So I called the newspaper and gave them this spreadsheet. I'm happy to share it with you. It's public record.
You probably want to make sure it gets up here, yeah.
Yes, there's enough copies, and there's probably extras. So the first thing that really concerned me was that it's referred to as a PILT payment. Any payment made in lieu of taxes is referred to as a PILT payment. And I get where you're going with that, but a PILT payment assumes that the entity didn't pay taxes and that the city was actually shorted those funds. I can assure you, if you look back through 2013, and I could have gone back further, the city has never been shorted a dime. All of their revenue that they asked for, they received. And if you also will notice that from 16 forward, after the fire district annexation, the city has carried at least a $2 million banked capacity from year to year. So the city's not even currently levying to its capacity. With that, there's also some concern about the nonprofit status. It's not just the nonprofits. Currently, we have identified on the tax rolls, but totally exempt from taxation are 595 properties within the city of Wenatchee, owned by 183 owners, different distinct owners. And that includes the college, state properties, school district, the PUD, Town Toyota Center, Link Transit, Port District, City of Wenatchee, Chelan County Regional Library, Fire District, Department of Revenue exemptions, which include churches and other nonprofits that are totally exempt. In addition to that, Department of Revenue has issued a nonprofit status an additional $25 million in exemptions for 126 properties. On top of that, there are two existing exemptions that I'm going to ask actually for some extra time.
Fine, you can go.
Okay. So the city actually has the authority to grant their own property tax exemptions for historical preservation and the multifamily. And we have $30 million worth of exemptions coming on in 2020 for exemption in 2021, approximately $30 million. We currently also have about, where did Aaron write that? I'm trying to think, the historical exemptions. Oh, here they are. For 2020 taxes, 8.7 million in exemptions, and for 21, 7.1 million in exemptions coming off the tax rolls. make no mistake, when there is an exemption, it is just like a senior citizen coming on to the program. Any exemption equals a tax shift. No taxing district is shorted, ever. They always get their full funding. So with that, I think that is it, but I can answer any questions.
I think we're aware of the tax shift we've talked about, and I think we're aware when we have to provide ordinances to give tax exemptions for those that are in the historic district. So I think we're aware of.
I just wasn't sure if you all were aware in the city limits that there are almost 600 properties that are exempt. That does include the hospital.
All right. Thanks, Dina.
Thanks. Well aware.
Hello, Beth.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Beth Stipe. I live at 121 South Garfield, and I wanted to come tonight and say how much I really appreciate the fact that the city is in the position that you need to raise revenues and to provide services for all of us who live here and appreciate this place. However, I think that this might not be the best way to go about it, and I would hope that you might reconsider voting tonight and perhaps spending a little bit more time thinking through other opportunities that might be available to you to raise those revenues that I know that you need in the city. Confluence Health has been a great partner throughout the community, not only to other nonprofit organizations, but I think to the city itself. I know Allison talked earlier about the homeless situation and how dire it is. And as you heard from Confluence, we've seen from our perspective at the Community Foundation, how they have stepped up to really try and help to partner with the city, with the schools, and other organizations like Women's Resource Center to support those of us who are working in that field in particular. In addition, I've sat through numerous meetings over the last several decades with a lot of city staff talking through economic development. And what we know about economic development when we talk about bringing in new businesses, high dollar businesses, as what Allison and Steve are trying to do, repurposing properties and bringing in businesses that will take over those properties, similar to what you're looking at doing with the Washington Department of Transportation on North Wenatchee Avenue. What are the things that those businesses are looking for? They're looking for a great place to live. We mentioned that earlier. We have wonderful amenities from our environment and from city services. We also have great schools. That's what other businesses look for. The other thing they look for is great health care. And I am incredibly concerned that if this tax goes through and Confluence is made to choose between providing great services and maybe mediocre services because they just can't simply afford to do it any longer, or they're going to have to raise fees, which are going to cause more uncompensated care. It's a vicious cycle. And so I think overall, from the city's perspective, I think it might be better to consider another way of doing a revenue increase without singling out Confluence Health because they do provide something that's far greater that maybe isn't quite as measurable, and that's high-quality regional health care as well as one of your largest employers in the community. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Beth. Hi, Paul.
Hi, good evening. Paul Schmidt. One of my concerns, I mean, what Beth talked about in terms of health care and in terms of the homeless, which is a concern for everyone. I mean, they're part of helping us save money on that. It looks like as a city is concerned. I know that's an expensive area. But this tax is only going to target them. So how about the other health care system here in town? Why are you not looking at them? And when I heard Allison say that, you know, she gave the list of everywhere we can get increased tax revenue, we've hit all of them but this one. So at what point do we start to say, when do we quit getting more tax money? I know things are expensive, but at some point, you know, which we saw with the $30 card tabs, people said enough is enough. And I think it showed that at a state level, at least, the appetite for more taxes wasn't there. So what I don't want to see is I don't want to see us as a community push so hard that we cross that limit, that threshold where people are saying, you know, then they start saying no to everything. And that includes, you know, schools and other things that are important to all of us in the community. they touched on, $100 million in Quincy for the data farms, that they allowed that new school. But we've made a decision here, at least the PUD has, that we don't want data farms. And there's both of those PUDs operate on two totally separate business models. Because we can do what we do in Chelan County, they can't do that in Grant County. So I think that was a good decision, and so that's kind of a moot point. I guess that's it. I just think that they add a lot of value here. I mean, I don't have any dog in this fight. I don't work there. I don't have any family members. Obviously, I know people that do work there, and quite frankly, I try to stay away from there. I mean, I don't like to visit them. So thank you, and I appreciate it. Hopefully you guys make a good decision on this.
Thanks, Paul. And you have a dog in every fight. You kidding me? All right, anybody else wish to address the council on this public hearing item? Anybody else? 1, 2, 3, we're done. All right, so I will turn this over to the council. Chief, are you out there? Would you mind coming up for just a minute? And I know there's been a lot of discussion about the need for police, and I think for those in the audience and those listening at home, and when the city prepared its budget, we went through our normal budgeting process, which includes looking at revenues. What's our sales tax going to look like? Property tax with a 1% plus new construction. What our utility tax is going to look like. We generally look at all of our expense categories. We have cost of living increases and those sorts of things. We really have no new staff this year at all. And our chief asked for, in essence, 3 new police officers. The reason that the number that we're asking for on the revenue side is less is because we have no way of getting them hired. It'll take us 6 months or so if we do so to get someone up on the street. The cost of a police officer all in with uniforms, healthcare, benefits is about $135,000 a pop or so, sort of all in. So, Chief made the pitch to our finance committee and to our council that he has some serious needs, and so that is how we've sort of gotten here today. So, Chief, can you give us 5 minutes on the need for the officers and what you're seeing out on the streets?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Actually, in the 2020 budget requests, there's 2 major components to it. Part 1 was the increased proactive enforcement regarding gang violence, gang criminal activity, and additional dedicated resources to partner with homeless and mental health service providers. Those things take a while to generate and develop the expertise that's required to get them up and running. There's a lot of laws, as we all know, as we talked about the Boise decision and several other key landmark decisions that are out there. The idea behind a team like this is particularly, it all falls under the umbrella of quality of life. And quality of life issues are something that are very visible, very real. As somebody drives through the city, they see somebody that's homeless. There's many different thoughts that get conjured up in visitors as well as our community members. And so being able to directly address some of that, and also on the mental health front, intervention further up the stream, so you don't have somebody going into full crisis before you have to go to another means of dealing with the situation. So it's a trend across the nation for embedding mental health professionals alongside with law enforcement to try and help curb some of those issues as they come up. The second piece is a capacity issue within our organization. Right now, we're across the nation, there's a struggle to hire new police officers. Finding the quality of candidate that you all expect out of your police department is becoming increasingly difficult. We have to retool within our police department to try and attract those candidates. Luckily, here locally, you can see that we've got everything going for us. This is a great valley. Quality of life is great for the most part, and people love coming here. But the thing that we struggle with is attracting those law enforcement officers, and we don't have a retention problem. We're very selective, very picky, and so the administrative piece of this is really to help us get over that hump and retool our recruiting process and actually recruit the very best.
What are you seeing specifically on the gang stuff? I've been hearing some stuff on drive-by shootings and stuff like that. What's the specifics on gang stuff?
So I have some statistics for you. Just this year alone, there was over 100 just reported cases of graffiti that is related to gang activity. We've had one robbery of a convenience store in our town, completely gang-related. We've had 3 drive-by shootings and 1 accidental shooting in which a gang member was playing with a stolen firearm, we believe. Those are telltale signs that you're having an increase of those type of activities, and that means that you need to make sure you address that from a law enforcement standpoint. Back in the 2008 to 2011, this police department did an excellent job of rounding up gang members that were perpetrating violent crimes, and a lot of people ended up going to prison. But we also had a downturn in our economy. The maximum number of officers that we've had within the city has been 45 officers. Flash forward 9 years, the growth of the city, definitely some additional issues that have happened over the years that relate to quality of life. We're just now, this proposal would have gotten us back to that 45 level that we were back at 9 years ago. Special investigations, when it comes to gang violence, requires a very solid skill set that, quite frankly, has been lost over the years through retirements, lack of activity, believe it or not, and now we're seeing an uptick again. When I put an officer up in front of a court and attest that he or she is a gang specialist, there's a pretty lengthy list of training that has to go behind that certification. And what we're doing right now is actually retooling a very successful process that has been in play for a number of years, but now over that 9-year time frame, it's steadily waned. And we had to pull those officers off of that special unit and put them back onto patrol just to make sure the shifts were covered.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief while we have him here? Thank you, sir.
Chief, I do have questions.
Yes, sir.
The gang activity really concerns me just because I've been spending a lot of time in another town south of here that has a tremendous amount of gang activity. Can you address a little bit what those plans are and how we would use an additional officer to try and stem that? Because what I see happening there, we don't want to go there, because if we think we have crises now with homelessness and things like that, that is far worse.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to know a little bit how this officer would help out in that position. You mentioned training, special training, so if you would.
So one of the main sources of training is the Northwest Gang Investigators Association, which basically covers everything that we're seeing within Washington State. Getting those folks trained up also helps them develop skills on how to gain intelligence. Something as simple as looking at a set of graffiti like this, seeing a moniker that's associated with the particular gang, and tracing that back to the person that did the graffiti. That's one piece of it, and it's probably the lowest level crime that we would be investigating to that level. Obviously, making sure that we know all the gang monikers that are out there, how they're associated within certain sets, within most of what we have here is Serranos, which is Southern California sets. We've identified at least 4 to 5, and that number seems to grow. And so those particular officers.
Clarify, 4 to 5 different gangs?
Yes, yes. Not necessarily gangs, but sets within a gang. And even those seem to be rivaling at this point in time. When you read graffiti, it's literally looking at a newspaper. It tells you who's fighting against who's being very active within the community, and also in some situations, who's doing the most recruiting. And so this going back probably 20 years in my career, I was part of the street crime unit right here in Wenatchee, and there was a lot of different avenues that we use there. It's not just an enforcement deal, it's also outreach and education to parents. What is the behavior of that particular kid at home that parents may not even recognize as gang-related? And so that is a critical tool into being able to drop the gang activity within your area. We also have to have great outreach with our school systems, not just Wenatchee, but East Wenatchee, Eastmont School District, and surrounding and going as far north as Brewster and Bridgeport, because there's a lot of gang activity that runs along the Columbia River and north and south of us. So being aware of what's happening in other counties, other communities is very important, and having that type of intelligence to where you can share it with your patrol officers that are making traffic stops on a regular basis. You need to alert patrol officers that they're coming up against somebody that might have a gun and is very much a violent individual. So it is a very specialized area. So is learning all the rules and case law related to homelessness and being able to address that appropriately and within case law and statute.
All right, thanks, Chief. Any other questions for Chief? All right, thank you, sir. All right, so I guess we'll turn it over to the council for any action. I guess I have
Can I make one quick comment?
30 seconds.
Yep, sure. Chief, I just want to say thanks for all you and your patrolmen do for us. And I think safety is huge with the quality of life thing. And I think that probably trumps a lot of the other issues. I know everything's important, but on the gang thing, we actually had a property that was tagged, and we called it in. They came this a couple of years ago, and the person got caught, and they actually had to make restitution, which was pretty interesting, I thought. So the court sent us like $10 every once in a while or something. So thank you.
Be sure to
Appreciate it.
declare that on your income tax return, please.
Yeah,
All right.
I did.
Yeah, I know you did, Paul. All right, so I guess I'll say just 3 or 4 things sort of from a big picture perspective. I think the process that we use for our budget is a good process, and you've all been involved in it, so you know the issues that we're facing on both sides of the area. You know, when I look at just a couple of sort of big picture items, you know, I look at this idea of a PILT, which is sort of my preference, and people say, oh, you can't do PILTs, you know, PILTs don't happen around here. And, you know, you look at Chelan County, and it's got 80% of their property is owned by the federal government, and the federal government pays them a PILT every year, almost to the point that if you don't fly back to Washington, D.C. 2 or 3 times and remind your congresswoman and man that they should be voting for the PILT, it's an automatic thing in county government. Yet somehow the city asks for a PILT, and we're sort of, well, that's obviously something we can't ask for, and we're sort of abomished. You know, how dare us look at our tax exempt properties in our city and see if there's a role for them to participate in city government. So I quite frankly think that there's a role for that group to play. The other thing I think, sort of looking at state level tax and the federal tax, you know, the IRS provides them, or many nonprofits, with tax exempt status, so they don't have to pay any money to the federal government, and I certainly get that, and I appreciate that's what they do. When the state says you're a nonprofit, you know, does that mean you don't pay B&O tax to the state? And the state says, no, we're going to give you a nonprofit status, but no, you got to pay B&O tax to us. Well, didn't sound like nonprofit for me. Well, no, that means you don't have to pay all your sales tax, right? Nonprofit means we're just going to give you an exemption on the state. No, you got to pay all your state sales tax too. There's nothing in the nonprofit status, and you pay all your B&O tax, you pay all your sales tax. So what the state does is they issue you a ruling that says, well, you just don't have to pay property tax. Right? And they sit there and write those things like candy in there at Halloween. And where does that burden fall when the state says, don't pay property tax? Right? It falls on local government, right? It falls on fire districts, school districts in particular. They're trying to raise levies. And then we all get to pay a little bit more. As the assessor said, it's true. We all pay more because of that. And so, I look at the tax system and it gives us odd sort of issues when you look at that. I don't think it's wrong for us to look at our nonprofits in our city, just like the federal government and the county looks to the federal government to provide them with money. So my personal preference is I'm a fan of the PILT, so I thought we probably should have done one. Disappointed that we couldn't get one together on a more long-term basis, because I think it would have sort of put this sort of B&O tax discussion aside. The other thing I would say, I think looking across the country and you look at sorts of tax systems, on the East Coast, most states and cities have an income tax. Say it's right or wrong, they just do. And so when you issue a nonprofit ruling to somebody on the East Coast, they don't pay income tax. And so you really see PILTs over there a lot because there's no mechanism in their code to collect tax from nonprofits, right? You get an income tax, property tax, sales tax. So they don't pay property tax. There's no way to get it there. In our state, we all don't like a B&O tax, but you have a mechanism. The state has given you a mechanism to equalize that if you choose to. And that mechanism is a B&O tax. That when you look at the 46 states in our state that have one, you were provided with information regarding the B&O tax paid by the hospitals and clinics in Bellingham, in Olympia, in Tacoma, and other places. So we're not making up something new here. This isn't like this hasn't been done some other place. And I would argue, just me, you may not want to hear this, we are more like a West Coast city than we are an Eastern Washington city. So when you look at Pasco and Richland and Kennewick, they can expand and expand and expand. Spokane can expand, all different directions. Yakima can expand, and we are landlocked. And we got a river and we got mountains and we protected them. And so eventually, as our city continues to do what it does, and we do our last 1,000 homes west of Western, we are done. We are done as a city in terms of construction sales tax revenue, except for infill. And eventually, may not be today, may not be next month, may not be 5 years from now, at some point our community will be required to look at some form of a B&O tax if that's the tool that the legislature has given us. And that is the tool they've given us. So my issue, again, whether it's today, next week, next month, whenever, it is sort of coming in some form or another. If you asked me, I like PILTs better. I think it's a better, easier for us to administer, but obviously we don't have one. So when I look at things big picture, that's sort of the way which is sort of the reason why you have this in front of you tonight. So those are sort of my thoughts. Any comments, questions about the specifics of the ordinance? I would, I'll add a couple other things. I think if I was the person, if there was a reason to accept it, I would probably think about removing the cap. I don't know that it's really necessary. I think there's some discussion about whether or not the $20 million threshold, maybe it should be $10 million. I mean, all you're doing is figuring out which ones are participating. It doesn't affect the tax any. So I think those are a couple things that you might think about if you're going to adopt one. But I think those are some things to sort of think about as we've sort of learned over the last couple of weeks of what's going on.
Well, since we're bringing some things up, I look at this as we talk about a police officer and gangs, and I'm going to say I was part of the finance committee, but it's not police officers and gangs. I see it as the city council's finance committee's error in not budgeting a situation that would allow another police officer. I understand there's only so much money and so much we can do. It's how you prioritize this money. I just circled a couple things as people talked. Uncollectible debt for people. Those are the people that need a little break, probably. And I'm not going to say the clinics, not Confluence Health isn't going to do that. They don't know what they would do. But if they get hit with 10 of these, 5 of these, that's a whole different world on it. I also put down sexual assault. They get it from other areas. That's a home run for me. Like, boy, that's a service that scares me. Then the heart attack. I have a heart attack dead. I don't care. I mean, that's life. That's me personally. But sexual assault is really a personal issue. It should be a high priority. And a couple of other things I put down was the Mehal Park. That's something we did. We help, we organize it. They put money towards it. It would be wonderful to do a pelt because it comes out nicer. You know, it comes out easier. But it doesn't appear it's going to be that way. And all the other, what they contribute to the city, you know, how does that work? Are they already contributing enough for the city with projects we're doing anyway? Is it transparent? Is it, which I don't know. I don't know what's transparent with them or how it works, but maybe they have a list and says, oh yeah, besides Mehal Park, we like the city, and that's why we wanted to do this, you know. Beth Stipe mentioned a few things, and I'm going to guess that's helping out with everything in the community. The last thing that I put down, Dr. Rutherford mentioned, was the change in our community, and it's the word trust. We don't want that. I don't want that. We want it to be a continuous situation. Maybe I'm just looking for the rainbow. Maybe I'm just looking for the pelt. I don't see it happening, and I just can't go with the B&O tax on the situation.
Anybody else wish to
Yeah,
discuss something or say something or do a motion or anything?
I lost sleep on this one, let me tell you. You got the police officer on one side, and you've got the Confluence on the other side. I really wish we could have done a pelt, but I feel this is a slippery slope going on BO tax. I think we're going to be eventually getting other people involved. I'm not sure that's where we want to go.
So what do you think about the fact that eventually we're going to have no construction sales tax, no Home Depot is going to, right? We're not going to have any of that in 7 or 8 years. We're just going to cut services.
Yeah.
Right? The chief is asking to get to his same place he was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the other argument, which is what you're saying is we're never going to have a B&O tax, and I sort of disagree with that fundamentally long term.
I think one thing that we're not using all our banked property tax.
Yep. And when you do that, you and I pay more.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
And your nonprofits don't pay anymore.
Yeah.
That's fine, just the shift. Yep. I get it.
I'm really struggling with this word that's been tossed around throughout the night about fairness.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Confluence Health. Yeah. How is it fair that, you know, they're the only nonprofit that this ordinance would apply to? But I also agree that how is it fair that they don't get to play, you know, they don't get to pay property tax, and the rest of us who are nonprofit have to split it amongst us what they're not paying? How is that fair? You know, we also heard about the good deeds they do in this community, and boy, do they do a good deed. I agree, 100%.
Yeah,
But then again,
yeah, no one questions that.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
But then again, so does Stemilt. And Stemilt pays property taxes. They too are a large company in this area who have a lot of employees, you know, who contribute to this community. So I'm kind of paralleling both Stemilt with Confluence Health. And they do great deeds to this community. And they pay property taxes. I'm just struggling. How is that fair?
I think that the right answer would be they shouldn't pay property tax, right? 'Cause they
No,
do great things.
that's,
Yeah, we should take them off the rolls and we should pay more for them as well.
no, that's not right.
I think all of us are struggling here, and to me, it comes down to we have several properties in town that are tied up that used to be revenue generators. I struggle with that, and I don't know where Confluence Health is going in the future, whether they're going to continue to buy up more parking as they need more space. I would like to see those properties freed back up so that we could bring in another car dealership. We could bring in some retail stores. We could bring in some revenue generators. You know, back when we formed Sustainability Committee, one of the things we were discussing clear back then is that we've become a professional city. We have a lot of professionals that work here that, you know, do various services, but they don't really generate a lot of revenue. They provide legal services, they provide engineering services, medical services, but they don't bring a lot of money in. And we were really struggling until we brought in the Sustainability Committee and had them make some recommendations. And one of those recommendations was this B&O tax. Now, I don't like the B&O tax either. I don't think any of us like this B&O tax. All of us would have preferred a PILT, but that's not on the table today. Maybe we could put that on the table in the future, but for now, as Frank said, Mayor said, that's what the state has given us as a mechanism today, is a B&O tax. I really don't want to see our city continue to have gang activity like I've seen in other cities. It is devastating. If we think we have problems now with homeless, I'm telling you, go south and spend a few weeks there, a month there, listen to the radio every day about constant shootings every single week that are devastating lives and causing even more medical issues for innocent people. We don't want that.
And I will tell you, if we're thinking of the same city in the South, that's exactly how it started, by ignoring it. Even though everyone knew that the problem was creeping up, and people just kind of tucked it under the rug until it was no longer, you know, controllable. So that's a real concern for me too.
Jim, you want to add anything? Linda? Mark?
I got a whole list of reasons here why.
You probably have the same list of why not.
Yeah, why I would not vote for this. And good reasons. And I get what everybody's saying, and we really need this. But I'm very concerned about Confluence Health and their long-term sustainability. I really appreciate the fact that Peter Rutherford came and talked to me. One of the things he brought up is right now they're at 2.64% profit margin, and they need to be 3% to be sustainable. Compassionate care, of which my brother is a recipient of this to the tune of several $100,000. He came down with colon cancer. He's lucky to be alive right now. They wrote off several $100,000. And $13 million that they're writing off in compassionate care is a huge sum. I don't know for sure, but I think that might surpass what they would pay in property tax, but I'm not sure. Another 15 million in uncollectible debt, they'll never get that. People, I see it every time I go up to the emergency room, and I've been there a lot over the past 3 years with my brother. People in there that go to the emergency room because they can get the health care they need, and they know they won't have to be turned away because they can't pay. It happens. I hate B&O taxes. I know we all do. We do. But I hate this one in particular because it really singles out one business. And I would propose that we look for another way. I don't think we should cut police. I do think the chief should be provided with his 3 officers, but maybe we go back to the table and we take a look at what other areas we could cut. We're going to spend.
So we can cut museum, we can cut streets, we can cut our public information officer.
We're going to spend $1.4 million on Maple Street.
Well,
maybe we wait until we save that.
Right, but you understand the difference between recurring revenue and non-recurring revenue.
I do understand that
very
clearly.
If we don't have recurring revenue.
Maple Street was part of recurring revenue.
No, it's not. Maple Street is a one-time expenditure. So
sure?
so we would have to cut, again, out of our reoccurring expenses, right? So look at the expenses that we have reoccurring.
I agree.
Jail, right? You just look at the list of them, and you would find one and say, okay, less for the museum, less for our street department.
But I do feel there are areas where we could go back and cut. Maybe we don't cut anything completely, but where we could whittle away at it to help make this up.
That's fine. And the issue is, we're trying to be a complete city, right? We try to work on cultural stuff. We try to make sure the roads are decent. We try to make sure we plow the roads and fix the potholes. And again, you can do anything in our budget that you guys want to do. But there'll be consequences when you choose to do that. And so it's all about prioritizing.
And to me, prioritize public safety, and that's the bottom line. But I can't vote for this.
Okay. That's fine. So, but I know where you're at. We want us to make cuts other places. Okay.
Well, my turn. I want to be very clear that, and it often happens in these kinds of discussions, that we're questioning the value of the services provided, in this case, Confluence Health. I don't know about anybody else, but for me, that's not what we're talking about. Absolutely not what we're talking about. I have been 6, 7, 8 years ago now. The 5 years before that, I spent at different times over a month in the hospital at Central Washington Hospital. Okay. And I have no doubt in my mind that I got the kind of care there that University of Washington or Boston Medical or whatever, I got excellent care. So I want that off the table. We're not talking about that. I too have a real problem, and I've had this from the very beginning, and Frank, you and I have had this conversation a couple of times or more. I have a real, both in practicality and philosophically, I have a problem of targeting a single entity. And even if we, in my view, you tax classes of people or classes or groups of taxpayers. You don't pick on just one person. And true, there are, the way the thing is written, there are other, other groups and entities that would sort of apply. But in the final analysis, it's going to be, Confluence Health is going to would pay the dollars. The public health or the public safety and whatever, again, that's kind of, we do need those officers, and there's a question about that. And I think that's, in terms of the budget, that's a conversation we can have. I don't think the crisis that you're talking about, Your Honor, is not imminent. It's coming. I agree with you on that. Absolutely agree with you on that. I don't like B&O taxes, and someday we may have to be forced to that, but we're not forced to that against the wall right now for that. There's places in the budget that we can, even this year or next year's budget, we can make those adjustments to get Chief his 3 officers. But I had, the quality, the fairness thing is it just doesn't feel right. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to vote no on this.
Okay. Mark, don't need to really say anything. If we don't have a motion, then we don't have to do anything. So I think I'll just give it the last little shot. If we don't have a motion, then there's nothing to talk about. So I'll give you a few seconds if anyone wants to make a motion. If they don't, then we'll move on to the next public hearing item.
I'm hearing enough concerns that this obviously needs more discussion and more research, so
Okay.
I think we should let it die.
So at this point, public hearing item is over. We're going to take about a 5-minute recess, and then we'll deal with billboards.
Notes and circle stuff, and I can't see.
All right, everybody, so just for information of the folks in the audience, we are still in a public hearing, so we'll use the same process from before, which is we'll hear from staff. We'll then turn it over to any members of the audience that would just wish to address the city council, and then we'll take it over to the council for any action they might be willing to take or might not be willing to take. So we'll hear from staff first. This is regarding billboards. So Stephen and Glenn, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. Steve Neuenschwander with the Community Development Department. Looking backwards just one step. Recently you adopted amendments to your sign code. During that process, billboards were minimally addressed, and those came in a couple of key insights from the survey. While the survey didn't ask directly questions regarding billboards, the public comments at the conclusion of that survey did address the billboards and spoke to the amount of sign clutter, particularly billboards on North Wenatchee Avenue, that the clutter is overstimulating, makes navigation difficult, and the billboards should be phased out. Those were some key findings from the written comments of the survey. For this process, we have sent letters to all owners or suspected owners of billboards. We've sent letters to known outdoor advertising companies notifying of this process. We've had a workshop with the Planning Commission. They held their public hearing last night, and then we are here this evening for your hearing as well. Comprehensive plan includes a variety of policies that speak to the visual appeal of the community, particularly the gateways, North Wenatchee Avenue, as well as looking at opportunities for advertising out non-conforming signs. The city has had a long history of looking at off-site signs. It's in the staff report, so I won't go through all of these individually, but in 1988, some standards were put in place, a series of moratoria and new standards, and culminating the last time that the city took position on this was in 2007, and adopting that ordinance 2007-34 that no longer permitted off-site signs, and that they all became non-conforming signs. The amendments before you do a series of things. First, they delete the existing standards for non-conforming signs in this section 10.72, as they're now would be obsolete because of the adoption of the sign code ordinance. We transferred over to the non-conforming sign standards to that section. It establishes an amortization date, 6 years from the effective date of the ordinance, which would by that time, the billboards would need to be removed. The amortization period is established through conversation with the city's legal counsel based off of review of existing codes and laws and the body of legal matter or legal issues related to amortization of billboards. Billboards that are in existence at the time of the ordinance could exist, continue without structural alterations until that amortization period. At that time, the billboards would then need to be brought into conformance by their removal. The draft also allows the city to not implement this timeline to remove the billboard when required by the Scenic Vistas Act or other state or federal laws that require the city to compensate or purchase those signs from those owners. So we generated an inventory map, and so the little orange boxes, those are the billboards throughout the community, and the green roads, those are the state, the national highway system, the state routes. So billboards that are on that system or visible from that are not eligible for amortization, but would need to be purchased. And that's a majority of the billboards in our community, of course, are on those major transportation routes. Planning Commission, they held their public hearing last night. They received testimony. They received testimony on a variety of different topics and issues, including the legitimacy of the amortization approach, legal interpretations, property rights, just compensation, constitutional takings, and the high likelihood of litigation based off of the nature of this issue. The Planning Commission, really the question that they had put before them, while they're a recommending body, those are great issues that were brought to them last night, but as a non-legislative body, they don't really have a say in decisions that the city makes that might bring litigation or affect property rights. They recommend to you, and those are your issues. Ultimately, the Planning Commission voted unanimously, 5-0, to recommend that you approve the amendments to Chapter 10.72. And the city staff has prepared Ordinance 2019-51 for your consideration that would accept that Planning Commission recommendation and establish the amortization period of 6 years, with the exception of those that may fall under the category of the state and federal laws that require compensation. Glenn, if you want to add anything else.
I think you've covered it well, Stephen, and we're here as a resource for any questions you may have, and certainly legal counsel, which we deferred to as far as the appropriate tool and time frame in the research on amortization.
So the ones on the highway, you can't amortize them out. So if the city ends up, for whatever reason, widening a roadway or whatever and felt the need to acquire it, it could be purchased.
Right.
Those that are amortized that aren't on this same highway have, if we adopt this, would have 6 years, and then they would have to be removed, or there couldn't be advertising on it. What's the issue? What happens in 6 years?
They would need to be removed.
Okay, the entire thing down, out, off the property, okay. Okay. And with our pole signs, we did a 10-year, correct? Right? Okay. All right, any questions?
Can you give us those numbers again? How many are on the highway? Or, probably more importantly, how many are not on the highway?
I'm going to reach back and see if Matt did all the research, and so we're glad he's here tonight. Didn't remember.
Didn't I see that somewhere? Hi, Matt.
Hi. I think it was 35 that are located on,
Don't forget to speak into the mic for all of our friends at home that are listening.
I believe it was 35 out of the 44 are located on this National Highway System's state routes. It's a little bit different in terms of what's visible. I don't know how broadly that gets interpreted. And so there are some that, for example, it might be on North Wenatchee Avenue or the South Wenatchee Avenue that you could potentially see from South Mission Street, for example. I don't know how broadly that gets interpreted. So but I counted, I think it was 35 that were directly on, definitely visible, intended for view from those roadways.
So really, just to be clear, this amortization really only affects 9 billboards.
9 or 10, yeah.
Generally.
Nine?
Correct.
Somewhere in there.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And just so you guys know, the state highway is North Wenatchee Avenue, then Miller for a couple of feet, and then Chelan and Mission. Is that correct? Help me out if I'm wrong there. Correct. Right, that is state route.
Yeah.
285. 285. So when you think of the state highway, it's not North Wenatchee Avenue, it's North Wenatchee Avenue to Miller in front of the mall, the 2 one-ways, right, then out over the bridge. Okay.
I have a question for Steve. Steve, do you remember the question Mr. Walker raised was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I can't remember anymore.
Last week, we're meeting so often.
Yeah. About whether somebody could, just set their sign back if there's a taking on the North Wenatchee?
Yeah, we determined that no, you could not do that. So if we take it, then they're non-conforming, they don't have the ability to move it.
Okay.
But in that instance, we would be buying the sign from them.
Yeah, you'd be
Yeah,
paying.
of course, yeah. It's just an interesting question. I wondered if.
It's the lawyer in you. All right, any other questions for staff?
Yeah, I have, again, kind of for Steve here. I mean, staff from the meeting last night, I guess. The question of, I guess what's used, the term used often is takings. So there would be no compensation for these 9 that we're talking about here. They're non-conforming. So at the end of 6 years, the business owner takes it down. There's no compensation. Is that correct?
That's correct. So why don't I flesh that out a little bit? The legal principle is that the municipality has the police power. It's under our police powers to phase out non-conforming uses. And so that's what we're really talking about here. The law requires that phase out allow a reasonable amortization period where the owner can basically recoup their investment. And it's a case-by-case determination. And so it comes down to a determination as to what's a reasonable period of amortization. We had a lot of debate about this through this whole process amongst staff and with a consultant. And the reality here is that these billboards have been here at least 12 years, some of them probably more. And so when you take that period into account, plus the 6 years that's being recommended as amortization period, the recommendation is that that's a reasonable period of time. So 18 years to recoup an investment. It's kind of a gray area, you know, what's reasonable? I couldn't sit here and tell you for sure what's a reasonable period, but I think, you know, a good judgment is that 18 years of a period to recoup your investment would be a reasonable period of time. In none of the comments that I've seen has any owner or sign company alleged that or provided evidence as to their investment and how long it takes to recoup and claiming that they haven't been able to do that. I haven't seen any comment like that. So.
Follow-up question, and I guess in the term of the term amortization kind of confuses me here a little bit, kind of like my question last week about permanent and non-permanent signs, I guess. I guess my thinking in amortization is that and the way it's being read here is that is a payout period prior to the end date. Is that, am I correct in that, the way we're looking at that?
Well, that's a common use of the term amortization. It's commonly used with respect to payback on debt.
On a mortgage area.
Amortizes over time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an imprecise word for what we're actually talking about. And what we're talking about here is a phase out.
Yeah.
We're setting a period in time when this phases out.
Yeah.
And stops.
Okay. Now, the language that's been added in or is in there, the blue thing where it says the city may elect not to apply any provisions of this section if the removal of a billboard would require the city to pay. So help me with that one. That one seems upside down somehow. If they is it a matter of that we get to the point and we don't pay, the billboard stays there? I mean, that's kind of the way it sounds to me. You just ignore it and it goes away.
So that goes to the issue, I think, of the, can't think of the term, the Scenic Vistas Act that allows these signs to stay along our state highway system. So if the city was required to pay compensation, we could elect not to take the sign out. So they would stay. That's what we've said. We acknowledge that they have the right to keep that sign there, but we also have the right to take it if we're willing to pay for it. So all this says is we can elect not to take it. Does that make sense?
So the ones on the state highway, right?
We're going to pay for those.
Or we don't have to pay for them and they can stay.
Right.
Okay. There might be signs we want to pay for. We might say, geez, that's a
that
really ugly spot for that sign. We want to take that out and we'll pay for it.
But the others could stay.
Yeah. Well, we can decide not to pay for it. It would stay. Yeah.
Okay.
Because obviously we have a financial issue. If we're going to say we're going to take all 25 of those, or 30 signs at $100,000 a pop. Right? So you might say, hey, this one's going to come out, let's look at 2 or 3 and let's maybe negotiate, but we may get to a point where, no, we're not removing some, right? And that's our choice. We don't have to take them. We have an option as to whether we do or don't, buy them, excuse me. Yeah.
And how would the value of a sign be determined? If we picked a sign and said, we're expanding this road, whatever it has to come out, we have to pay for it. How is that value of that sign determined?
There's appraisals that do that.
Yeah, well, there's a process in that Scenic Vistas Act, and I think the first step is negotiation, and if that doesn't work, then you go to appraisals.
So it's a
It's like
standard
a
process, just
condemnation.
like if we were getting a piece of property.
Yes.
Basically.
Could we, would invoking eminent domain be one way that could be done to take?
That's essentially what it is.
Yeah.
That's what we'd be doing.
All right, any other questions for staff? All right, thanks, gentlemen. So we'll turn over to any members of the public that wish to address the audience. Tammy is the timekeeper. As you saw, we were a little lenient with some of the timekeeping last time, but we'll try to hold you to somewhere near that 3-minute time frame. So just come on up one at a time. We'll want your name and address for the record.
My name's Neil Schreibeis. I'm with Lamar Outdoor. Obviously, we have some of the signs that you guys are discussing. I had some notes that I was going to read through, but I kind of want to change it based off of the 3 minutes.
Do you have an address for the record?
Oh, I'm
Are you there?
sorry. I'm in Spokane, Washington.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And I guess I'm kind of jumbling around because I'm going off of some of what your comments are. One, I've heard that they were going to probably not take signs along the state highway based off of the just compensation that you would have to pay for it. There's statutes that say even though the billboards are not on a state highway, you still have to pay just compensation if you're going to do a taking. I know that he's worked hard on looking at statutes that say that you can amortize a non-conforming use, and you can amortize that out. That's never been done with a billboard. And I guess how I would equate it is if I was a person that wanted to come in and do business, and I either bought a property or rented a property and started a business. It's not my intent for 20 years down the road or even 50 years down the road just to walk away from it. I want to create a business that will sustain itself and keep going forward, not get rid of it, not just walk away from it after 20 years. And that's what you're asking us to do. Even if they were there for 100 years. We're a business that's trying to help other businesses. 90% of the advertisers on at least Lamar, I can't speak for the other companies, are local businesses. There was a study done of 36 polls over a 30-year period by Charles, I can't remember his last name. I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous.
You're doing fine.
Taylor, there you go, thank you. And it was 3 out of every 4 businesses that advertised on billboards estimated that they would lose income, sales, if they weren't able to advertise. And it was estimated that 18% of their sales would drop if they weren't allowed to advertise on billboards. That's 1/5 of their income. Not very many businesses can sustain losing 1/5 of their income. It's not only our business that's going to get affected. It's other businesses that we help try to promote their business. It's also the landowners who we pay rent to. You know, we pay taxes, we pay rent. We do business in here just like anybody else. In some respects, I feel like it's almost like some of the things that were brought up on the last hearing were similar to what is here. You're going after one industry, and that was a nonprofit. Now you're going after billboards.
Try to wrap it up.
Okay. To wrap it up, I would say we would have been excited if the city had approached us prior to this, so that we could have had a working relationship to help you with your aesthetics. The things that you're looking for, you want things to look better. So do we. We want to improve the looks of the city. We would like to see the improvement, the looks of the billboards. Right now, we're locked in. We can't touch them because of the ordinance. We have to keep what we have and keep them the way they are. We would love the opportunity to work with you to make things better and not be adversarial in nature.
Thank you. Hey, Dennis.
Hi, Mayor, council members. Dennis Johnson, 1512 Anton Place, Wenatchee. Unique position being on this side of the table.
Probably didn't miss it at the last public hearing, did you?
No, not at all. I was happy to be out there. The job is no easier, and I commend all of you for doing this. And congratulations also to Tammy on your 10 years. That's remarkable. I am a sign owner. I've actually owned signs in Wenatchee for over 40 years. And fortunately, my signs are on property I own. They're not leased ground, I own them, and I rent them. And to local businesses for their advertising opportunities. Fortunately, my signs happen to be on state right-of-way, or not state right-of-way, but the state route, I'm sorry, and which by the comments it's sounding that those are not typically going to be affected. However, I'd like to just give some an aspect of this to go back for a moment to 2007. And when the council at that time approved the current ordinance, which was to basically eliminate any new construction of outdoor billboards. And that was making them non-conforming in both commercial and industrial zoning districts. And that stopped all construction. It also stopped anybody from really improving their billboards, because now you can't do anything with them because they're non-conforming. You can't alter them, but you can still use them. And the ordinance said we could do that. You can go ahead and maintain them, you can operate them. So to say 6 years is adequate, I don't think that is an adequate time frame, because we've had a business plan. People make a business plan, and it's more often longer than 6-year period of time. And to say now that business plan for if you own many of these, that's gone. I don't think that's equitable. I'm not sure that we ever intended to use police power to force people out of ownership. There's one thing to take, there's two elements in many of these, because companies lease ground from a property owner. So you're going to force the sign owner to take out their sign, but you're not compensating that landowner for the lost income they will have from the years and years of rental income and that rental income into the future. I think that needs to be compensated. My gosh.
You can have a couple more minutes,
Okay,
Dennis.
thank you. I wanted to talk about the survey. We live we are a regional trading center, urbanized in its nature. Chelan and Douglas County has 120,000 people. We've got another 139,000 in Grant and Okanagan County. We pull those people to our community. As a result, we are an economic hub, the largest city in those 4 counties. We are that trading center. We need to advertise. We need to have the opportunity for everyone that comes to this community to find where Confluence Health is, or to see an advertising for the technical skills at Wenatchee Valley College. Those are important items that we need to maintain in our community. If we're talking about the survey that was done was for 500 individuals. That's just out of a population of 35,000 in the city, another 15,000 in East Wenatchee. There's 50,000 people, but we only are looking at 500. Of that 500, only 300, roughly 60%, basically have said they aren't happy. They'd like to either remove or do something. Nobody was asked, are you interested in taking a sign without compensation? Nobody asked that question. And it would be interesting to see how many people would agree to take somebody else's property without payment or any form of restitution. So my theory is this. If North Wenatchee Avenue has too many signs, this is not the answer, because the 9 signs that you're talking about are not located on North Wenatchee Avenue because that's a state route up to Miller Street. So we're not going to solve that problem. If we want to solve a problem on signage, invite the sign owners in. Let's have that meaningful dialogue and find a way to either phase some out over time. It may be long-term compensation concepts. There's a lot of avenues. Right now, I pay a permit fee to the state of Washington for my signs. I pay nothing to the city. Why don't I pay a permit fee to the city? I don't know, but I don't. So there could be some revenue sources there if we look at things.
Can we B&O tax
Okay.
signs?
Here we go again.
Oh, I got to laugh.
It wasn't me that indicated that, okay?
Mark had the same question. He was just afraid to say it.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for your time, but that the 6 years is not adequate if you do enforce this. The people have to have a planning time frame to do this. And don't forget that property owner that is going to be left without income. The sign's gone, somebody else has removed it, and what about the property owner that has been relying on that income for over the years? Okay?
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you. Thanks.
Come on up, sir.
Hello. My name is Benjamin Goro. I'm the local Lamar advertising rep here. It's getting late. Thank you all for your time here. I'd just like to reiterate a couple things, summarize a few things that I thought were important. From what I've heard and gathered, it does sound more like an illegal taking rather than an amortization or anything of that nature. I don't believe we were given sufficient notification for any of this. I didn't receive anything until last week, late last week in the mail. We discussed earlier, in the earlier discussions about revenue generating businesses. That's what we do. We advertise for revenue generating businesses. I do, personally. It's going to be an expensive endeavor to the city and or taxpayers. We don't know who's going to pay as of right now, from what I've gathered, if it does happen. And I think there would be a better way than what's proposed now, a compromise, like Dennis said. I think a simple conversation could be started to find a better avenue. Moreover, it's either, I see it as two things. You can pay for the removal of some of these signs or put that money into something much, much better. Roads, schools, police, things of that nature. So that's basically it. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address the council on this particular item regarding amortization of billboards? Oh. Mr. Snyder.
Mayor, City Council, thank you for your time and hanging in there this evening. My name is Jim Snyder. I reside at 34 Jennings Street in Wenatchee. I'll make a couple of quick points. I won't drag this out because you guys have been through a lot this evening already. I would like to point out, in case some people don't know, the majority of these billboards have been up for 30, 40, 50, even 50 years. So this is what I would consider to be, or is becoming, an antiquated form of advertising. You can see any progressive cities or beautification programs, they don't want the competition for on-site signs, and these are off-site signs that are competing against businesses that have their own signage on site. I'm curious, so when we say amortization, so many of these billboards for decades have had the opportunity to recoup their costs already. So when it comes down to saying, well, just compensation and all that, what are they technically worth with their structure and their framing and everything else that goes into these? I mean, that money's been recouped. So throwing out large numbers, tens and tens of thousands of dollars in just compensation, I don't think that's what would be necessary. I could be wrong, but I think when it was come down to an appraisal of those, it would show that they're actually much less and the value is much less. So we're trying to create a vision for Wenatchee through our comprehensive plan that has been come up with. And there's no way that you can have all these signs going down North Wenatchee Avenue and the other state routes and accomplish that goal. And if we, in fact, can't, without just compensation, have some signs come down, then I ask, why not go back to the statute or the code that does protect that and go back and say, hey, we need to get an exemption. We need to look at altering this so that it does work for ourselves and the billboard company. But I don't think that these structures and everything else are worth, after 30, 40, 50 years, worth $100,000. I could be wrong. But I do want to thank you all for the time you put into this, okay? And the planning department and all the time and the headaches and all you've been through. So thanks for the process that you've done and for even looking at this issue of this sign code and billboards as part of that. Okay, so thanks.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
All right, anybody else wish to address the council on this public hearing item? See no other takers. I will turn it over to the council for any action they may or may not be willing to take or discussion. Again, another meaty issue for you guys this evening.
Who's the code person around here? I'm curious, Mr. Johnson mentioned something about they were non-conforming since 2007?
Correct.
Is that an accurate statement?
That is correct.
So they haven't spent any money since then. So that would make it 18 or 19 years not putting up a new sign. Is that an accurate statement?
They might have done maintenance, but they haven't done, they haven't been permitted to do, replacement of the signs, things of that nature.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so like all things that we have, if you own it and we change the law, you're required to keep it there and maintain it, but you can't change it dramatically or it needs to be, right? Yeah. So just like our sign code, we just adopted, we made some changes to that.
Well, we're saying 6 years, but if nothing's happened since 2007, it's, there was no notice.
Yeah, and I think that's what Steve Smith was getting to. So I think the issue is tonight, either we can spend some, obviously a motion and a second and and adopt what the planning commission recommended. If you want some more time, I suppose you could continue the hearing or remand it back to the planning commission to spend some time thinking about other sorts of issues. I look specifically at the look on North Wenatchee Avenue, and I tend to hear consistently that we need to make it look better. If we're getting ready to spend something close to $100 million on North Wenatchee Avenue, part of that needs to make it look better. And so I think that's the reason why we had the sign ordinance the way we had it, and we've got the billboard ordinance here. We're getting ready to spend a bunch of money, and this is our time, if that's something that you're interested in doing.
So point of clarification for me then, as is right now today, if we wanted to go remove a sign from North Wenatchee Avenue that was in a right-of-way that needed to move, or we simply just wanted that sign removed, we could then purchase that sign and have it removed, could we not? Even without this ordinance, is what I'm saying.
If it's
'Cause it's
on
a
the
non-
portion of Wenatchee Avenue that's on a primary state route, the portion that's not on the primary state route
And that's where I was referring to, the state route portion.
is a different approach. Is that correct, Mr.?
So really, this ordinance, when we get right down to it, this ordinance affects 9 or 10 signs, roughly.
In a different fashion than currently exists under the Scenic Byways Act. Would that be correct, Mr.?
So Steve, if we decided that we wanted to, I'll take Dennis to sign just because he's in the room. We didn't like it, we wanted to buy it out, right? Dennis says, not interested. We're saying, no, we're really interested. Do we have a right of eminent domain or condemnation on a sign where we go in front of a judge?
Yeah,
And we
you've got to
figure out
show
what.
public purpose for that, so, like, we've got a project right now where we're taking a sign.
Right.
Because it's related to a project, so it normally would be related to a project.
What if it's just because we just want to get rid of billboards, just because we think they don't look nice and we.
I mean, there's a public purpose that's consistent with our comprehensive plan.
Okay. So your opinion is, I said right or wrong, that if it's consistent with our comp plan, that we would have the ability to do that if the city so chose, whether we adopt this ordinance or we don't adopt this ordinance.
So we could still accomplish the same thing. It might just be a little bit more difficult.
We'd have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right.
And with the amortizable ones, right, those would just be continuing to be, and if we wanted them, we'd have to buy those out as well. And the issue is, do we have a condemnation right on those as well?
On
The 9 or
State
10 that we're
route.
going to
Yeah.
amortize, we do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would think so.
So the only issue is it a 6-year am or are we out writing checks? Right, if you want to get rid of billboards, that's sort of, am I missing anything different than that?
And I guess there's a sticking point in my mind. I mean, the fairness of it.
Right.
If we are taking somebody's property and they're going to have lost revenue, maybe they should have some kind of compensation.
Right.
I have to agree with that.
But you could also take it, on the sign code,
Yeah.
we said 10 years.
Yeah.
And those people are going to tear down their sign.
It would be a little more consistent with that, but.
Right. No, I'm just saying that's what we adopted.
The fact that the state has put some rules in there that affect the signs along the state route makes me wonder.
Yeah. So what are we thinking? Give me some ideas, thoughts.
I'm
What the-
curious as to what the planning commission discussion was on the amortization period, if
They,
any.
the planning commission deferred to legal counsel's determination on that.
Thanks.
So they basically made a policy decision as opposed to a legal decision.
Correct.
Yeah. So from a policy, from their perspective, was that these should be sort of amortized out a little bit. Yes, Dennis?
It would be remiss if it wasn't mentioned the fact that one of the planning commission members attempted to make an amendment to the motion last night to compensate all billboards, but was told that that was not appropriate and couldn't be done.
Okay.
Clarification on that, the statement was that it hadn't been reviewed by legal counsel.
Okay.
Don't be confused. As legal counsel, I'm not arguing that 6 years is the right number of years. The question is, can we support that?
Right.
And we view that in light of the fact that they've already been prohibited for 12 years, an additional 6 seemed reasonable. But would it be better, would it be more conservative to have more years? Yeah, possibly.
But I think, to me, and I'm not going to, 6 years versus 10 years isn't the issue. The issue is, should we be paying for these or should we make them worthless over time? To me, I think that's the, right, when you're sitting there going, these guys should be compensated, right?
Yeah.
Whether we have a 6-year AM or a 10-year AM or a 42-year AM, in
Yeah.
42 years, they're going to come in and say, pay me for my billboard. So at the end of the day, for me, the amortization, right, on a billboard where someone's collecting is sort of different. To me, it's like, are we going to pay them for their billboards? We are for 30 some of them, whatever it is, right? The issue is, should we pay for all of them or not? I guess is sort of where I'm sort of looking at it.
And again, to me, it comes down to 9 or 10 billboards.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm moving on. Let's flesh this out.
Okay.
I make a motion that the council accept the planning commission's recommendation and we adopt ordinance number 2019-51, amending and restating chapter 10.72 nonconforming uses structures and lots of the Wenatchee City Code, with the exception that in section 10.72.050 nonconforming, or subsection 2, that the amortization period may be used for a period of 10 years after January 20th, 2020. That's my motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Motion by Councilmember Kulas, second by Councilmember Poyer, to adopt ordinance number 2019-51, amending and restating chapter 10.72 nonconforming uses, structures, and lots of the Wenatchee City Code, with the change that the amortization schedule be changed from 6 years to 10 years.
And I would just comment for the record that in my opinion, that corresponds with the same amortization schedule that we provided for other signs in the previous adoption of the sign amendment ordinance. So there's, in my mind, there's consistency in that action.
I like that, Mark.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, mayor's report. I got about an hour.
We don't.
I know. So the only thing I was going to tell you is that next year, and now I've changed my mind, so we have a pavement preservation program scheduled for next year. We had budgeted $4.7 million, assuming that the 976 stuff would come in, and it's not coming in. So the Finance Committee and the Public Works Committee looked at really 3 options. Do we do 4.7 million, take all of our reserve accounts and all those street funds down to almost nothing, but at least it's the cheapest you're ever going to get these roads done? Do you do something like 3.7 million? Obviously, that doesn't require us to transfer any money, leaves a little bit for the year after and the year after. I think mostly being able to buy asphalt for those really thin seal coats we've been doing. Or do you go to 2.7 million and say, you know what, we're just going to get the very bare minimum done this year, and we're going to wait to see sort of what happens with other sort of transportation revenue and those sorts of things. So those were the sort of the 4 things. The consensus was do the $3.7 million option. And so the reason we need to know now is staff has to go out and hire get all the design stuff done now, or we're never going to get it done next year. So that was the reason why we met with them in Public Works and in Finance, was to sort of flesh that out. The consensus was 3.7 million, which I think is probably the right thing, unless you want to have 3 new police officers, and I wonder if that's the right answer. So I'm just a little bit confused. I think if I was asking for direction, I think I would say, let's direct staff at 3.7 million and sort of see where it goes. But that was what I was going to say today, is that was the approach that we had discussed as being the appropriate one. But those staff guys need to know. They need to hire engineers yesterday.
I don't have heartburn spending the money on roads because the roads really need it, but I don't know that we have found the right approach, because the job they did this last summer is falling apart fast. and I'm not happy with it.
Yeah, and I'm just the opposite. I'm thrilled with it. Where I'm driving.
You need to come drive through our neighborhoods then, because it's, I mean,
There's
you know,
some spotty
we were
areas.
thinking that maybe that little balding was where the truck had not driven a straight line or something like that, but those balding areas are getting wider. We haven't hit them with a snowplow yet. Not once.
Overlay, right?
The ones I'm driving on, I like the traction, the
I
black
like the
stuff.
traction,
Yeah.
where it's held and stayed, but I want to see what that looks like after a year.
But you know, next year, we're not doing any of that, right?
Right.
So we're not doing any chip seals next year. Next-
What are we
Next
doing
year's
with
all-
3.7?
Overlays.
It's all overlays.
Yeah.
It's all overlays.
Every bit of it. It's all the,
Yeah.
it's overlays, and it's all the handicap ramps.
ADA ramp.
Right.
and
I think
overlay.
if we bring it down lower than the 3.7 based on the little margins that I saw, we're going to end up paying a lot more for roads if we bring it
Right.
down to.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm.
I didn't realize these were overlays. I'm
No,
okay
that's
with it.
okay. No, these are all overlays, and so we'll go with 3.7, okay?
Sorry.
But I'm telling you that this idea of getting Chief what he wants is going to be a discussion for us in January, February, in terms of what other,
Yes.
I'm assuming revenue's off the table, so
No.
we'll start looking at,
No, we need to look at some other revenue areas.
Okay.
And there are some. And they're small,
right.
but a lot of small things
Several small
Add
add
up
up.
to big
Okay.
add up
things.
to big
I'm
things.
interested in what you're thinking in terms of revenue choices.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Okay. All right, with that, we're adjourned.